Chapter 23:11. You're Meg. A voice came from the kitchen door. Meg turned around and saw an elf in a blue dress standing at the door. She was looking at him in shock as she clutched her chest. She was extremely beautiful, with well-defined facial features and a curvaceous figure. Even though she was wearing a loose dress, it was still difficult to hide her graceful figure. If it weren't for the fact that she looked a little funny with her hand over her chest, as if she was having a heart attack, Meg would have thought it was pretty good. I think you can be a little more natural. Don't clutch your chest, use your expression to express your feelings at the moment. That feeling of surprise and guilt. It would be even better if you could have some tears in your eyes, Meg suggested with a smile. As a strong career woman, crying doesn't fit my character, Irina rejected. Meg shook his head. A strong career woman doesn't cry easily. That's only because it's not the time to be sad. Wouldn't it be a waste if you don't feel a little tired at such an exciting moment of reunion? Do I really have to cry? You don't have to. After all, the emotional climax should be when Amy appears. When you see the little girl you haven't seen in 3 years, your longing for her overlaps with reality, and your emotions suddenly explode. That's what it feels like, Meg suggested. Irina put down her hand and looked at Meg. Isn't this how I was when I first met Amy? Yes, what you have to act now is how you were when you first met Amy. Just act according to how you felt at the time. Meg nodded with a smile. It's a little difficult for me to express my emotions in front of so many people. Irina shook her head. Relax, we're all family. Just act naturally. Don't act too weird and make people think that Amy has a strange mother and that you ran away from home because you were mentally unstable. That's enough, Meg consoled her. Get lost. Irina stomped her feet and left to practice. Meg smiled and continued to cook the porridge. Irina's transfiguration technique was actually quite powerful. Unlike the cheating method of the 100 transformation mask, her transfiguration technique could alter her appearance through magic and maintain it under control. This kind of disguise was almost no different from changing one's head. It was impossible to see through the disguise with the naked eye. Her appearance had changed greatly, but she was still the prettiest one out of all of them. Meg naturally didn't have any objections to this. After all, he couldn't force the other party to dress up as ugly. Wouldn't that be wronging the boss's wife? During breakfast, Irina looked at Amy and said, Amy, from today onwards, Mother is officially coming back. Haven't you always been here? She even slept with Father last night. Amy looked at Irina in confusion as she chewed on a soup dumpling. Irina's expression stiffened slightly, but she quickly smiled and said, I mean, from today onwards, I will officially return as your mother. From today onwards, you can tell everyone that I am your mother. The soup dumpling in Amy's mouth fell into her bowl. She looked at Irina in surprise, and said, Really? Amy can really tell everyone that you are Amy's mother? Irina looked at Amy's surprised expression, and suddenly felt a little jealous. She smiled and patted her head, and nodded. Yes. Then can you go to the next parent-teacher conference with Father? Amy asked. We'll go together. Irina nodded. That's great. I'm so happy. Amy slipped off the chair and jumped into Irina's arms. Irina hugged her, and said with a smile, however, in order to avoid some trouble, Mother will come back with a different appearance, just like when we were in Rodu. Amy, you have to keep this a secret from everyone. Amy nodded thoughtfully. I know. I can't let everyone know that Mother is the elven princess. That way, no bad guys will come looking for us. Smart girl, as expected of my daughter. Irina patted her head with a smile. And you have to keep this a secret from me too, Irina said to Anne. Anne nodded obediently. She smiled and said with sign language, then we can eat breakfast together with everyone in the future. In order to avoid suspicion, Irina usually ate breakfast and left in advance to avoid meeting everyone in the morning. She didn't want to be unable to explain why she slept here last night. When she had the identity of the lady boss, she wouldn't have to wake up early to have breakfast. She could go out early and sleep until she woke up naturally. Then, she could go downstairs and ask Mag to make breakfast for her. Irina looked at Meg and said, let me make it clear first. Other than managing the money, I won't interfere or help with anything in the restaurant. That includes being the cashier. She came back to be the lady boss. She didn't want to be as busy as when she was in Rodu. This wasn't the lady boss she wanted to be at all. She had a lot of things to do. There were still many things she had to deal with the night elves. Okay. I wouldn't dare to trouble our lady boss. Meg nodded with a smile. I'm full. I'll leave first. I'll come back when I'm done. Irina put down her chopsticks, and then went out. After Irina left, Amy looked at Meg with a worried expression, and said, Father, Mother is coming back. What about little Guai and big sister Gina? Are you going to let big sister Gina be the second wife? Meg looked at Amy, who looked like she wanted to share her father's worries, and couldn't help but want to laugh. However, where did this little one hear about the second wife? However, with her mother's fighting ability, even if he had the intention, he wouldn't have the guts to do it. However, just as Amy said, Irina was back, and so was little Guai. How to solve this problem was quite a headache. Not only big sister Gina, but those sisters who are obsessed with father might also be sad. Amy held her chin with one hand, and was a little worried. Okay, hurry up and finish the rest of the buns, and then go to class next door. Meg smiled, and interrupted the little one's worries. No, I don't want to go to Teacher Julian's place so early. I want to wait for little Guai to come to the restaurant and play with her for a while before going. The wishing well hasn't given me anything yet. Amy shook her head. Meg was deep in thought. It seemed like Amy's system had given her a mission for little Guai's arrival, but he didn't know what kind of mission it was. It seemed like Amy was about to complete it. Okay, then I'll go out later. Meg nodded, and then reminded, you have to remember what your mother said just now. Don't let it slip to anyone. Okay, I'll remember. Amy nodded obediently. Chapter 23:12. Not long after, the bell rang outside the restaurant. I'll go open the door. Amy jumped off the chair and ran towards the door. Big sister. Once Amy opened the door, little Guai's soft voice could be heard, and a chubby little fellow jumped into her arms. Little Guai, fly. Amy picked her up. She was also very small, but she was able to pick her up with ease. Meg and Gina, who was standing at the door, smiled at the sight of the two little fellows laughing together. Boss is so lucky. Such adorable little ladies are his daughters, Mia said enviously. If you're tempted, then take Boss down. They'll have to call you Mom, Angela egged at the side. Mia's eyes lit up. However, she blushed after taking a look at Meg, and shook her head without saying anything. I think big sister Gina has a chance. After all, she's such a beautiful woman with a gentle personality and a great figure. Even I like her. She even has a child now. Boss will be won over sooner or later, Barbara said softly with a gossipy face. I wonder if Boss will consider marrying too. I heard that some men in Chaos City have a few wives, Phyrus said softly. Everyone turned to look at her. I didn't mean that. Phyrus blushed immediately, and shook her head. Right at this moment, an arrogant voice sounded from behind. I just left today. Who gave birth to such an adorable little dumpling? All the ladies turned around and saw Camilla, who was wearing a long black dress and a white fox fur coat. She was looking at little Guy, who was trying to ride on Ugly Duckling's back. Big sister Camilla, you're finally back. Angela winked at her with a smile and said, this is little Guy, big sister Gina and boss child. What? Camilla's eyes widened. She glanced at Gina before looking at Meg. She spat out 2 words angrily, beast. This fellow tied her up back then, but only used a whip to whip her. But he actually went to have a child with Gina. Was she, Camilla, really inferior to Gina? Meg was originally quite happy that his chopping tool was back. However, after hearing what she said, he suddenly felt wronged. He hadn't done anything to Gina. How was he a beast? However, the children were all there, so he couldn't say anything. He could only invite everyone in. Come in, I made breakfast for you. Everyone came in one after another. Camilla stared at little Guy for a while. The little girl was as cute as Amy and had the same blue eyes. She really did look like a sister to Amy. Xiao Guai is so cute. Congratulations. Camilla and Gina said with a smile. However, when they glanced at her, they exclaimed in shock, You've broken through grade 10. Camilla was shocked to discover that Gina had become a level 10 powerhouse. Upon hearing that, everyone looked at Gina in shock. Only Elizabeth was calm, as if she had already discovered it. Yes, I just broke through not long ago. Gina nodded slightly. She appeared rather normal. After all, compared to Xiao Guai, breaking through to grade 10 was only a small surprise. However, Camilla was very envious. Gina was younger than her, but she had already become a 10th tier great magic caster. She was probably around the same age as Irina when she broke through to grade 10. She just had a child yesterday, and then broke through to grade 10. Could it be that, having a child with boss can break through to grade 10? Camilla appeared to be in deep thought. She looked at Meg with a fiery gaze. Meg felt her fiery gaze, and looked at her suspiciously. He had his guard up. This woman doesn't look like a good person. Boys have to protect themselves when they're outside. After everyone had breakfast, Meg said to Camilla, we went to the Demon Islands to play 2 days ago. We went to the Vampire Island to look for you, but you weren't at home. So you came back to Chaos City. Camilla grabbed a youtiao with one hand and a soy milk spoon with the other as she casually asked, didn't I welcome you to the island like a VIP when I mentioned my name? I almost got beaten up when I mentioned your name, Meg said honestly. Camilla spat out a mouthful of soy milk, and angrily said, there's such a thing. How dare those fellows? It's all right, big sister Camilla. I sent them flying, Amy said smilingly. Camilla looked at Amy, and felt relieved yet embarrassed. But you don't seem to be very authoritative as the chief. In the end, you had to rely on Barbara and Elizabeth's names to make them stop, Meg said, shaking his head. Camilla lowered her head and bit into her youtiao. She was so embarrassed that she didn't want to talk. It wasn't as if she didn't know. Otherwise, she wouldn't have become the chief, but couldn't even stay on the island. Those fellows pretended to obey, but secretly opposed. They called her the chief on the surface, but didn't take her seriously behind her back. They still followed her father's lead. But this kind of internal conflict was actually exposed in front of others. Didn't she, Camilla, want to save face? Seeing her awkward expression, Meg didn't continue on this topic. Instead, he asked, did you come back this time because you were passing by, or are you officially returning to the restaurant? Camilla looked up at him and said, you still owe me a month's salary. If you come back, I'll raise your salary. I'll double it, Meg said smilingly, like an uncle holding a lollipop. Really? Camilla's eyes lit up, but she quickly calmed herself down. No matter what, she was the chief of the clan now. She couldn't appear too happy over a salary of a few thousand copper coins. She raised her chin slightly and revealed a queen-like noble expression. She glanced at Meg from the corner of her eyes, and her red lips curled up slightly. Since you sincerely asked me to come back, I'll consider it. After we eat, cut up the ingredients that we prepared this morning. Okay, 500 pounds of pork with fat and lean meat. Camilla's voice suddenly stopped. She slowly lowered her head and swallowed the rest of her words along with the soy milk in her mouth. How embarrassing. Meg was very pleased with Camilla's return. This would free him up more time, and at the same time, it would save him the trouble of recruiting new employees. I'm going to school. Be good at home, little Guy. I'll play with you after school. Amy patted little Guy's head and said goodbye to Meg and the others. Then, she picked up her bag and left for class. She was having magic classes at the magic potion shop next door. She didn't need Meg to send her to school. Ding! Congratulations, little madam, for completing the mission. You have received 96 favorability points from little Guy. This is the favorability range for the closest family member. Little madam will receive an intermediate level curse spell as a reward. As soon as Amy stepped out of the door, the system's voice sounded in her mind. Daddy's restaurant in the alternate world will continue to be updated on the handwriting bar. There are no advertisements on the website. Please bookmark and recommend the handwriting bar. If you like Daddy's restaurant in the alternate world, please bookmark it. Daddy's restaurant in the alternate world updates the fastest in the handwriting bar. Chapter 23:13. Middle-level curse magic. Amy paused in her steps, and then showed some doubts. Isn't curse magic a magic that only bad witches use? There is no good or bad magic, the bad ones are the ones who use the magic. Moreover, this is a curse magic that is not very harmful, but is very insulting. It is suitable for punishing bad people, and is not the kind of curse magic that is vicious and cruel. The system replied. Amy's eyes lit up. Sounds interesting, then give it to me. The reward has been issued, young mistress, please learn it on your own. A small experience bag appeared in Amy's mind. Amy opened the experience bag with her consciousness, and information flowed into her mind. Middle-level curse magic, random misfortune spell. The target of this curse will randomly encounter a medium-level misfortune for 3 days, but will not be life-threatening. It looks interesting. Amy was thoughtful. This magic was too simple. After knowing how to cast the spell, she learned it. Even the communication was superfluous. After greeting the customers lining up at the entrance of the restaurant, Amy skipped toward the magic potion shop. Out of the corner of her eye, she suddenly saw a skinny man in a black cloak at the back of the line, reaching out to steal the purse of the uncle in front of him. Humph, annoying thief. Amy was about to take out her foldable chair, but suddenly remembered the new magic she had just learned. The corners of her mouth rose slightly, and she silently chanted a spell, then pointed at the thief. The black-cloaked thief's hand had already reached into the uncle's coat in front of him, and when he felt the heavy purse, his face lit up. This was enough for him to live freely for half a month. Sure enough, there were many rich people who came to Amy's to eat. But just as he was about to slowly take out the purse and put it in his pocket, his foot suddenly slipped, and his whole body fell forward, directly falling flat on his face. Rip! The uncle's luxurious robe was torn, but as a professional thief, the purse was still tightly held in his hand. However, his movement immediately attracted the attention of the customers in the line. Especially the uncle whose clothes were torn inexplicably. When he saw the purse in the skinny man's hand, he immediately understood what had happened and shouted, "Thief! Catch the thief! He stole my money pouch!" The thief's expression changed greatly. He rolled on the ground and got up. Grabbing the money bag, he ran away. The money pouch was already in his hands. As long as he could escape, he would have profited greatly today. However, after running less than 10 meters, he stepped on a fruit core that someone had thrown at him. He slipped and performed a split on the spot. Rip! It was the sound of his crotch being torn and the dull sound of something hitting the ground. All the men present subconsciously inhaled a breath of cold air. Ah! The thief let out a groan of ecstasy and clutched his crotch. He was in so much pain that he couldn't get up from the ground for a while. This thief is too unlucky. We don't even have to do anything. Sargers looked at the thief with amusement, and gestured for Mond to stop. The customers in the queue also laughed. It was really interesting to see this stupid thief in the morning. Hearing the surrounding laughter, as well as the mocking and disdainful gazes, the thief lowered his head and covered his face, his entire body trembling. He had lost all his face. How could he continue to mingle in the industry in the future? Wasn't it just stealing money? Did he have to be humiliated like this? The commotion had already attracted the attention of the Grey Temple's inspectors. 2 inspectors quickly rushed over. They pinned down the thief who couldn't get up from the ground for a long time, and returned the money pouch to the uncle. "Hey, isn't this the experienced thief, Black Toad? Why are you here to perform for everyone so early in the morning?" "It's really rare," the inspector said with a chuckle. "Don't say any more. Don't say any more." The thief covered his face and wept. This time, his career was over. The uncle took back the money pouch. Although his clothes were torn, he smiled when he saw the thief in such a state. While everyone was still discussing this thief, Amy had already jumped into the magic potion shop in a good mood. This curse was really interesting. When she met bad guys in the future, they didn't have to be beaten. She just had to point her finger, and bad luck would naturally find them. "Little Amy, what happened? Why are you smiling so happily?" Cece, who was pregnant, asked with a smile when she saw Amy walk in. "There was a stupid thief outside just now. He wanted to run after stealing the money, but he fell down." "It was so funny," Amy said. "There are such stupid thieves." Cece also covered her mouth and chuckled when she heard that. "Also, Big Sister Gina gave birth to a little sister for me. Her name is Xiao Guai. She's so obedient," Amy added. "Gina gave birth?" Cece was stunned when she heard that. She didn't look like she was pregnant a few days ago. "Really?" Amy nodded. "But, don't tell me she gave birth to Mr. Mac's child." Cece felt that she had grasped the key point, and asked with a strange expression. "Yes, yes. Xiao Guai is my father's child. She's my biological sister," Amy said with a nod. I really didn't expect that." Cece felt like she had heard a big piece of gossip early in the morning, but she still said with a smile, "Then I'll go and see the little sister later." "Okay, then I'll go to class." Amy nodded and ran upstairs. Meg, who was sitting in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, saw how the thief fell down outside the restaurant. He also saw Amy pointing at him. Although he didn't know what Amy did to him, the thief's fall definitely had something to do with Amy. He just didn't know if it had anything to do with the system. Father, I want a kiss, hug, and raise me up high." Meg was in a daze when he suddenly felt a little thing hugging his leg and climbing up. Okay. Meg smiled and picked up Xiao Guai. He kissed her pink cheeks, then raised her up high, put her down, and raised her up again. He, the little one's laughter filled the restaurant. I also want to kiss, hug, and raise you up high, Angela said enviously as she hugged Yabamiya. Then you can tell the boss. He might satisfy you, Barbara suggested. Wouldn't that be letting him off easy? Angela shook her head decisively. It's hard to say who will be letting him off easy. Barbara shook her head. Angela looked at her with a serious expression. Since you said so, then leave the door open at night and warm the bed for me. I'm going to visit you tonight. I'll add 3 more locks and set up 10 killing arrays, Barbara said with a serious expression. Chapter 23:14. In Irina's office, Ashley carried 3 cups of fruit juice and placed them in front of Irina. Princess, this is our latest version of weight loss fruit juice. After eliminating dozens of fruit juices, there are still 3 flavors left. The 3 types of fruit juice were orange, green, and white respectively. The color and luster all looked good. Let me try it. Irina picked up the white cup first. Her nose twitched slightly as she said, "Is this coconut juice?" "It's coconut milk. It's made using the local ancient production process. After carefully grinding the coconut meat, it's made with coconut milk," Ashley introduced. Irina took a sip of the coconut milk juice, and her eyes lit up immediately. It was a very refreshing taste with a faint coconut milk fragrance, but it didn't have a very strong sweetness. The texture was delicate, and it felt very moist in the mouth. After swallowing, there was a faint fragrance in the mouth. The original taste of weight loss tea that was difficult to swallow had been completely improved. This was more like a delicious beverage, not a weight loss tea. Not bad. Both the texture and the fragrance are very good. Irina drank 2 more mouthfuls before putting down the coconut milk juice. A smile appeared on Ashley's face. This was the greatest affirmation for their work during this period of time. Then, Irina tasted the other 2 cups of fruit juice. 1 cup was orange juice, and the other was apple juice. One was sweet and sour, while the other was fragrant and pleasant. Each had its own characteristics. Moreover, there were plump fruits in the orange juice, and the taste was quite wonderful. These 3 types of fruit juice have surprised me. The texture and taste are better than most freshly squeezed fruit juices. Even if it doesn't have any weight loss effect, it should still be liked by everyone. Irina put down the last cup, looked at Ashley, and said, "However, our original intention was to sell weight loss tea. How is the weight loss effect of this version of weight loss fruit juice? We've done a comparative experiment these few days. The weight loss tea that has the texture and taste improved has the effect of reducing fat and weight loss reduced by half." Ashley lowered her eyes, looking somewhat self-reproachful. "Very good. The texture and taste have been improved to such an extent, and you can still maintain half of the weight loss effect. You've done very well." Irina nodded, feeling gratified. Ashley was surprised by Irina's attitude, but she was still a little worried. "But Princess, if the weight loss effect is halved, will it cause people to stop buying our products?" "No, as Meg said, whether people will buy our weight loss tea depends on the weight loss effect, but whether they can drink it consistently, maintain a high frequency of drinking it, and increase the return rate is determined by the drinking experience of this weight loss tea." Irina shook her head slightly and said with a smile, "Although the weight loss effect of such an excellent fruit juice is halved, it's not unacceptable for them to drink 1 more cup. They're even willing to drink it every day. This is a long-term business." Ashley was deep in thought. She already understood what Irina meant. "Let's follow this standard and find a stable source of fruit. As long as we can mass-produce the fruit, we can start selling and opening the store," Irina said. "Okay." Ashley nodded. She turned around and walked away quickly, unable to hide the smile on her face. Why do I feel like I'm becoming more and more of a businessman? Could it be that I've been infected by that guy? Irina propped up her chin with one hand and fell into deep thought. After dealing with some factory matters, Irina went to inspect the factory. Looking at the time, she left the factory and headed in the direction of Mama's. Mama's. Everyone was preparing for lunch. The dishes on the table were all served, except for one empty seat. Boss, the princess said that she has been quite busy recently, so she won't be coming to the restaurant for lunch. Phyllis suddenly thought of something and said to Meg. I see. Meg revealed a surprised expression. Everyone was also a little surprised. During this period of time, Irina would come for lunch and dinner. With her status, it was naturally inappropriate for them to say anything. After getting to know her better, they quite liked such a companion. After all, there weren't many experts who were as strong and easy to talk to as her. After all, her man was the strongest existence in this world, and she was also a top-notch 10th-tier expert. Then let's not wait for her. Let's dig in, Meg said as he picked up his chopsticks. Just then, the bell at the door suddenly rang. Isn't it not opening hours yet? Could it be a customer who doesn't know the rules? Yabamiya turned around and asked curiously. I'll go take a look. Gina stood up and walked to the door. The door of the restaurant opened, and an extremely beautiful elf stood at the door. She was wearing a long blue dress that accentuated her slender figure and exquisite figure. She had a white cloak draped over her shoulders, and she looked like an orchid. Gina looked at her and couldn't help but be stunned. Everyone in the restaurant turned around, and their eyes lit up when they saw the elf standing at the door. Such a beauty was really breathtaking. What a beautiful sister. But I don't think we've seen her before. Anna whispered to Shirley. Yes, we haven't seen her before. She shouldn't be an elf from the Wind Forest. Shirley nodded. She hadn't been seen among the night elves either. The customers lining up outside the restaurant also looked at the beautiful elf curiously. They didn't know why she would knock on Amy's door at this time. Hello, the restaurant isn't open yet. Please wait in the line for a while longer, Gina said with a smile. Excuse me, is there a man called Meg here? The elf asked as she looked into the restaurant. Clatter. The chopsticks in Meg's hand fell onto the table. His eyes widened, and his mouth opened slightly. He slowly stood up from the chair, and his lips trembled slightly as he said, It's you. Irina bit her lower lip lightly and took a step forward. She looked at Meg and nodded slightly. Yes, I'm back. The restaurant was silent. All the girls were dumbstruck and confused. What's going on? Could it be? Everyone's gaze moved quickly between Meg and Irina before landing on Amy. Yes. An elf. A beauty. A reunion after a long separation. Could this be the mysterious lady boss of Amy's? Everyone's expressions suddenly became interesting. They all had different emotions. Some were eager to watch the show, while others were sad because their hearts were shattered. However, Irina looked at the full table of girls and children in the next moment. She suddenly stopped in her tracks. Surprise, sadness, resentment, and all kinds of emotions flashed across her face. I didn't expect you to have so many wives and concubines in just 3 years. You even have so many children. Irina stumbled a few steps back. She clutched her chest and looked at Meg. Her voice trembled as she said, So, the clown is me. Daddy's restaurant in the alternate world will continue to be updated in the handwriting bar. Chapter 23:15. Meg almost burst out laughing when he heard Irina's words. What? Shouldn't his current persona be an imposter husband who raised his child with great difficulty, stayed alone in an empty house, and finally found a wife who abandoned her husband and daughter. Why did the persona suddenly change, and he became a treacherous scumbag who had a bunch of wives and concubines? However, Irina's words basically confirmed her identity. The 3-year promise happened to correspond to Amy's age, and she also had a pair of azure blue eyes that were as clear and pure as Amy's. At this moment, her eyes were glistening with tears, and she looked very pitiful. This is Amy's lady boss. She's so beautiful. It's over. My dream is shattered. Countless beautiful girls are destined to lose sleep tonight. No. Many old aunties won't be able to sleep either. The customers outside the restaurant were the first to explode. Although they were discussing softly, their gossipy souls were already burning fiercely, and they could not stop at all. Irina was really too beautiful. Even though she had changed her appearance, she was still so beautiful that other women had even lost their jealousy. Jealousy had no effect on those who were out of reach. Moreover, there were many voices that started to pity her. After all, they had been separated for 3 years, and when they returned, they saw their husband eating at the same table with a bunch of young and beautiful women. There were even a few children with him. No matter who it was, they would not be able to remain calm. Camilla stared at Irina for a while, then looked at Meg and thought angrily, this guy's wife is so beautiful. No wonder he ignores me. Hetue, scumbag. Amy's mother is back. Then, does that mean I can't take care of Amy anymore? Can I still continue to stay in the restaurant? Phyllis thought worriedly. Meanwhile, Gina, who was standing beside Irina, also had mixed feelings. Amy's mother was back, so what should she and Xiao Guai do? If he continued to stay here, would it bother her? However, Gina still gently held onto Irina's shoulders despite her chaotic emotions. She shook her head with a smile, and said, Madam, it's not what you think. We're waitresses in the restaurant, not Mr. Meg's wives. We're just having a working meal. We don't live together. As she spoke, she closed the door of the restaurant and shut the disturbance outside. Is that so? Irina composed herself and looked at Gina. Then, she looked at the girls sitting at the table. The girls hurriedly nodded. It was indeed not good to be misunderstood. You're my mother. At this moment, Amy appeared on stage with a chicken drumstick in her mouth. She hurried onto the stage after being hinted by Meg with his eyes. The little guy had just eaten a drumstick and was ready to be an onlooker. Irina's gaze fell on Amy, and her body trembled slightly. Tears instantly welled up in her eyes. She took 2 steps forward, then suddenly stopped. Hesitantly, she said with certainty, You're Amy. Yes. Amy nodded. She hid the drumstick behind her back and wiped her slightly oily mouth while she was at it. My daughter. Irina went forward and squatted down. She pulled Amy into her arms and hugged her tightly. Her expression was a mixture of sadness and joy. Tears slowly flowed down her cheeks. The way she revealed her true feelings moved everyone present. Meg also had mixed feelings when he saw this scene. If he was still complaining about Irina's exaggerated performance a moment ago, then he could feel Irina's true feelings at this moment. He suddenly understood how she felt. Perhaps it was a few months ago when they met for the first time after a long separation. The scene when the mother and daughter met for the first time was moving. However, to her at this moment, she was announcing in front of everyone that this was her daughter. As a mother, this should be very important to her. Amy's emotions were also affected by Irina. She said softly with a sobbing tone, I also have a mother now. I'm so happy. Alright, it's good that you're back. Live well from now on. Meg went forward and helped Irina up as he comforted her gently. Irina hugged Amy and sniffed. She looked at him and said, "Seeing that you raised your daughters so well, I'll forgive you for now." "Meg?" "I'm very honored." Meg nodded. Why should he reason with his wife? He could only pamper her. "Let me introduce everyone. This is Caroline, my wife and Amy's mother." Meg stood beside Irina and introduced her to everyone. "Sorry, I misunderstood you," Irina said apologetically. "It's okay. Then you're the lady boss." "I'm Yaba Mia. You can call me Mia. I'm in charge of taking orders at the restaurant." Mia stood up and introduced herself. "Hello, Mia." Irina nodded slightly. She had already taken the role of the restaurant's lady boss. "I'm Barbara. I'm in charge of serving the dishes." "The super awesome kind," Barbara said. "Hello, Barbara." Irina nodded. "I'm Jane. I'm in charge of cleaning the table." I'm a little stupid," Jane said a little embarrassedly. Irina's lips twitched, but she still smiled and said, "I think you look quite smart. You should be more confident." "I'm Hannah. I'm in charge of buying soy sauce and freeloading," Hannah said with a smile. Hannah giggled. She was no longer working at the restaurant. After all, the matters of the winery were enough to keep her busy. She even had to scrounge meals from time to time. Irina nodded with a smile. "I'm Elizabeth." "You're very good." Elizabeth looked into Irina's eyes. She seemed to be trying to find a sense of familiarity in them. "You have to continue working hard." Irina nodded slightly. When it was Camilla's turn, she didn't stand up. She looked at Irina and said, "I'm Camilla. Your husband begged me to eat here." Meg's eyelids twitched. What was this unknown woman talking about? Irina looked at Camilla and said with a smile, "How did he beg you? Can you tell me more about it?" Camilla choked. She glanced at Meg from the corner of her eyes. For a moment, she didn't know how to continue. After all, her film was still in Meg's hands. If he was angered and lost his mind, it would be terrible. "He begged me with double the salary." Camilla felt embarrassed after saying that. "That's right. I think you're worth that price." Irina nodded with certainty. "I'm Angela. I'm in charge of attracting customers with my beauty." Angela stood up and looked at Irina with a smile. "Madam, you're so beautiful. You're the most beautiful elf I've ever seen." "Is that so?" "I heard that the most beautiful elf in the world is Irina. How can I compare with her with my ordinary appearance?" Irina covered her mouth and chuckled. Meg's brows were already furrowed. How could she say something like that? End of chapter. Chapter 23:16. After a brief self-introduction, Irina used Caroline's identity to get to know the ladies in the restaurant. After everyone recovered from their shock, they were still rather happy that Meg had found his wife and Amy had found her biological mother. After all, Miss Caroline, whether it was her beautiful appearance or her powerful abilities, showed her true colors as a strong career woman. It was hard to find any fault with her. Meg calmed down a little, and looked at Irina as he said, "You haven't eaten yet, right? Do you want to sit down and eat together?" "All right." Irina looked at the table full of dishes, and said with a gratified expression, "I haven't seen you for 3 years, and your culinary skills seem to have improved a lot." "When there's no woman around, it's faster to draw the knife," Meg said calmly. "So, my culinary skills naturally improved." "It's good, but it's hard on your hands," Irina said with a little heartache. Everyone. They couldn't understand what they were saying. This meal was a little inexplicable. The new lady boss was very friendly. After briefly connecting with Amy, the mother and daughter began to eat on their own. It didn't look like they had reunited after a long separation at all. Were you held up by something before? Why didn't you come back to the restaurant for so long? Firis asked carefully. She had always felt sorry for little Amy. The little fellow grew up with her father, and didn't enjoy her mother's love for even a day. Now that Amy's mother was back, although she didn't seem to have the right to question her, she still couldn't help but ask. Haven't you always? Irina said instinctively. You really should give Amy an explanation for this matter, Meg quickly interrupted her, and said in a more serious tone. She glanced at Firis, only to find that she had almost been led astray by Firis. A self-reproachful expression appeared on her face as she said, what happened during these past few years can't be explained in a few words. I was trapped in a place, and I only managed to break free a few days ago. After that, I immediately rushed to Chaos City. Amy, Mother has let you down, Irina said seriously as she looked at Amy. It's okay, I've already forgiven you, Amy said nonchalantly as she waved her greasy hand and continued to gnaw on her chicken wing. The girl's impression of Irina improved once again. Although they didn't know what she had encountered, her feelings for Amy couldn't be hidden. Her eyes were filled with adoration. You're big sister Amy's mother, and I'm big sister Amy's father's daughter, so what should I call you? Xiao Guai had run over to Irina at some point, and she looked up at her and asked. Darling. Gina bit her lower lip lightly, but she didn't know how to stop the child from asking this question. She could only look at Irina nervously. This was a white lie from the boss to Xiao Guai, but to Caroline, it should be hurtful. Darling, you look so obedient, so of course you have to call me Auntie, Caroline said matter-of-factly. However, on second thought, she shook her head, and said, oh, that won't do. Auntie sounds too unpleasant. You can call me Auntie Caroline. Auntie Caroline. As she said that, Irina even turned to look at Gina with a smile, and said, what do you think, little sister Gina? If you think it's suitable, darling, we'll call you that. Gina nodded slightly with a smile on her face. Irina was surprisingly magnanimous, which made Gina feel a little embarrassed. She could only explain it to her when Darling and the rest weren't around. Auntie Caroline, you're so beautiful. Darling looked at Irina with sparkling eyes. You're just like a fairy from heaven. Little one, you have such a sweet mouth. Irina reached out to pinch her chubby cheeks with a smile. Darling returned to Gina's side happily, and continued to eat. Irina ate a piece of red braised pork, and suddenly turned to look at Meg. She said with a hint of resentment, back then, you tricked me with your culinary skills. I didn't expect your culinary skills to have improved again. You must have charmed many ignorant beauties, right? Everyone at the dining table had a strange expression. Some lowered their heads guiltily, while others were deep in thought. So, Meg had conquered a 10th-tier elven magic caster with his culinary skills. Everyone didn't find it hard to accept. They stayed at Amy's not only because of Meg's good character, but also because of the strong attraction of the food. This was a temptation that even powerhouses couldn't resist. Eat more if it's delicious. Meg gave her 2 pieces of red braised pork. This guy was too engrossed in his role, and couldn't stop eating. The lunch ended in a rather good atmosphere. The ladies accepted the lady boss who suddenly appeared out of nowhere quite well, at least on the surface. Meg nodded to himself. With Irina's personality, it was already not easy for her to be able to do this. The restaurant is about to open for business. Everyone will be very busy. If you're tired, go upstairs and rest first. We'll talk about our business after we're done, Meg said to Irina as he looked at her. I'm not tired. I'll just watch from the side. I might even be able to help a little. Irina consciously sat down on the chair behind the counter, and said with a smile, "It's my first time being the lady boss. I need to get used to it first." "All right." Meg glanced at her, and then turned to walk toward the entrance of the restaurant. Outside the restaurant, the customers were still discussing the beautiful elf who just walked in. From the limited information they had, everyone had basically determined that the elf was Amy's biological mother, who was also Mr. Mac's first wife. As for why she had never appeared in the restaurant before, and why she seemed so distant when she knocked on the door to ask questions, there were many different versions. For example, the beautiful lady boss abandoned the disappointing Mr. Mac and their newborn daughter and ran away with another man. Mr. Mac abandoned the beautiful lady boss and ran away with his sister-in-law. Crassus and Julian, who were standing in the front row, were communicating with each other telepathically. "Who do you think she looks like?" "You think she looks like her too?" Although her appearance and figure are different, there aren't many level 10 elves in the world. She's so young, and Irina is the only one in the past 100 years. It's hard not to think of her. For a genius mage like Amy, I've always wondered who her mother was. Now it seems that she has always been excluded from the list. If she's her, then wouldn't Mr. Mac be? Mr. Mac always closes the door on time. For example, when something big is about to happen. The two of them looked at each other and revealed a thoughtful expression. When there were too many coincidences, the answer would naturally appear. Speaking of which, it's not unreasonable for little Amy to learn melee magic so easily, Crassus said thoughtfully. Chapter 23:17. The restaurant was open for business. Meg stood at the door and welcomed the customers as usual. However, today's customers were all looking at Meg differently. The young women all had looks of regret and resentment in their eyes. His first wife had returned, and she was such a beautiful elf with such a beautiful temperament and appearance, as well as Amy, the adorable little treasure. The position of lady boss basically had nothing to do with them anymore. The men looked at him with envy and mockery. He had 2 beautiful and adorable daughters and a beautiful wife. This kind of life could be said to be perfect. However, Mr. Mac was usually surrounded by a group of beautiful girls. He used to be a bachelor, but now he was a married man. He probably wouldn't be able to do anything in the future. Crassus and Julian looked at Meg seriously. They still found it hard to associate him with Alex, who killed the demon with his sword. That guy was so arrogant. He couldn't even look at anyone other than Irina. However, Meg stood there with a gentle look in his eyes. He didn't look arrogant at all. He was just an amiable boss who made money. Meg, Alex. Looks like it's true. Crassus transmitted his voice to Julian with mixed feelings. Julian was silent for a while, then nodded slightly. So, we were tricked by this guy and Irina. They deliberately made us take Amy as our disciple, right? Crassus laughed angrily. You can go back on your word. Little Amy only needs me as her master, Julian said calmly. Bullshit. Little Amy is my disciple. No one can change that. Julian immediately blew his beard and glared at them. They sure are carefree parents. Both of them are clearly the strongest in the world, but they left little Amy to us. Julian couldn't help but complain. Crassus shook his head. I don't want Amy to learn anything from them. Just the 2 types of magic are enough to keep Amy busy. Don't bite off more than you can chew. It's not like you don't understand. The 2 of them entered the restaurant and saw Irina sitting behind the counter, winking at them. It seemed like she knew that she couldn't hide it from them anymore, so she decided to lay her cards on the table. The 2 of them frowned and pretended not to see Irina as they sat down in their usual seats. The corners of Irina's mouth curled up slightly. She leaned back comfortably in the chair, looking like a lady boss. As the guests entered the door one after another, they couldn't help but take a few more glances at Irina before secretly praising her in their hearts. Whether it was her temperament or her appearance, she was an impeccable beauty. It even made people feel that it was a little unfair for such an otherworldly fairy to sit in this restaurant as the lady boss. However, it was precisely because of this that she gave birth to such a beautiful little cutie like Little Boss. Everyone's gazes subconsciously fell on Ugly Duckling, who was putting makeup on it with another cute little girl. Who's that little cutie? Yeah, she's so small. She looks even younger than Little Boss. She's so cute. She's pink and tender, and her eyes are a beautiful blue, just like Little Boss's. Could it be the legendary fairy wife running away with a ball? I already have the outline. Who's going to write it? Everyone's gazes were successfully attracted by Xiao Guai. Firstly, the little girl was really too cute. She sat on the stool with little Amy, and they looked like a pair of sisters. Secondly, the timing of her appearance was a little coincidental. The lady boss of Amy's was back, and then there was such a cute little girl. Was there some connection that everyone liked to see? Unfortunately, there was no one to answer their questions. The customers entered the restaurant, and the restaurant opened for business. Everyone was busy, and no one had the time to gossip with them. Mr. Mac is so lucky, isn't he? Not only is his wife so beautiful, but he also has a new baby. Another adorable little girl. Harrison had already turned into a lemon spirit. If you're envious, then hurry up and prepare to have one of your own. George, who already had a considerate little girl, was much calmer. Hee, it's still early for me. I'll go to your house after dinner. I haven't seen my goddaughter for a few days, Harrison said with a smile. Irina sat behind the counter and watched the entire restaurant open for business. This was the first time she was participating in the restaurant's business, even if she was just watching. She saw hundreds of customers coming and going. She saw their anticipation as they waited for the food, and the happiness they felt when they tasted the food. Some people came in pairs, drinking to their heart's content, and chatting merrily. There were also people walking alone, quietly enjoying the food. They were just as happy and content. She saw Mia and the others busily walking around, but they were able to deliver the food to every customer in an orderly manner. She also saw Meg standing alone in front of the stove, as if he was in a battle without swords. He was calm and immersed in it. She saw his back view, and she received the customers' expectations for the food. Sitting behind the counter for a few short hours, she seemed to have seen all kinds of life. This experience was very special. It was full of smoke and fire, but it made Irina feel happy. Compared to being a queen ruling over a region, she felt that being the lady boss of this small restaurant seemed more interesting. Previously, she was still wondering why someone like Meg would one day open a small restaurant and be willing to stay in the kitchen for a few hours to cook for strangers, just to earn a small amount of money. Now, she understood him a little. Walking the world with a sword might be satisfying. Leaving a name in the world sounded cool and invincible, but it was also very boring. When she was young, she had done most of the places she should go and the things she should do. However, because she was too famous, she didn't know how to settle down and had fewer friends. She was like that, and Meg was even more so. Now, Meg was no longer like that. He had Mamie's, many old friends who would come to eat his food every day, and a warm home like this restaurant. The ladies were all very good. She knew how they came here and why they chose to stay. It's pretty good to be a lady boss. Irina's lips curled up slightly. She decided that when the night elves were on the right track, she would completely give up her power and be a lady boss with peace of mind. Mr. Mac, your wife is back. Are you not planning to marry me anymore? Just as the business hours were about to end, a lady suddenly rushed to the kitchen door and looked sadly at Meg, who was grilling skewers, and asked with hidden bitterness and sadness. The restaurant suddenly quieted down, and everyone's eyes turned to look at them. Meg's hand that was grilling the skewers paused. He turned around in confusion and looked at the young lady standing at the kitchen door with a confused expression. "Miss, who are you?" End of chapter. Chapter 23:18. Standing at the entrance of the kitchen was a delicate and pretty young girl. She was wearing a long cotton dress with blue and purple patterns. She had a head of soft brown hair, neat bangs, and a bit of baby fat on her face. She was quite cute. However, Meg did not have a deep impression of her. She was probably a girl who liked to eat red braised meat. Her name was Cynthia, and she would come to the restaurant once a week. Other than that, he did not have any special memories of her. So, Meg was confused by her sudden question, "Are you not going to marry me?" May I ask, when did he ever promise her such a thing? Cynthia looked at Meg and felt the gazes on her. She suddenly came back to her senses, and her face flushed red. She covered her face and lowered her head slowly. "Oh no. This is not a dream. I shouldn't have gone out to eat after staying up all night to rush the manuscript. I was in a daze and didn't even walk out of the plot. Ah. My old face, it's all lost." Cynthia lowered her head and her body trembled slightly. She seemed to have fallen into a great sorrow. The customers looked at her weak and helpless back and sympathized with her. They looked at Meg with a bit of disdain. "Scumbag. His wife is back, and he actually turned his back on her. What kind of bad intentions could this little girl have? How could she use her innocence to deceive people?" The customers thought in their hearts, but they were not in a hurry to stand out. Irina also looked at Meg with interest. She did not know this girl, but she was sure that Meg would not do such a thing to such a pure little girl. However, the current situation was really interesting. She could not help but want to know how Meg was going to solve this problem. Meg looked at the girl who was alone in sorrow and used silence to deal with it. His face was suddenly filled with black lines. "Why are you covering your face? Say something. I am a pure person. How can I be sullied by you like this? Miss, I don't think I know you, and I didn't say anything about marrying you. If there's anything, let's talk about it face to face," Meg said with a smile. "Speak. How can you say that?" Cynthia buried her head even deeper. "Could it be that I stayed up late last night to write your novel and was so immersed in it that I almost fell asleep while waiting in line today? When I heard that your wife was back, I rushed up to say this." Cynthia wanted to find a crack to hide in, but unfortunately, Mamie's floor was too smooth and there was no such thing as a crack. Facing Meg's burning gaze, as well as the surrounding gazes filled with concern, Cynthia felt immense pressure. After a long silence, Cynthia put down her hands that were covering her face and slowly raised her head. She looked at Meg with red eyes and said, "I know, I will leave quietly. You don't have to worry about me." With that, Cynthia turned and walked towards the door. Yes, she knew she was wrong. Now, she just wanted to leave this place quietly. She wanted to find a place to dig a hole and hide in it. No one would care about her. That was the greatest kindness. In her 3 years of work, this was the most embarrassing moment of her life. This feeling was no different from someone she knew reading her novel through her face and dying on the spot. "Meg?" The restaurant guests. "Hey! You're making things worse." Meg wanted to roar. This girl didn't seem to have said anything, but at the same time, she seemed to have said everything. A simple sentence successfully confirmed his reputation as the #1 jerk in the world. Meg didn't expect that one day, he would be tricked by a girl like this. She's so pitiful. She's like an innocent girl who's been cheated of her feelings. Although I don't think Mr. Mac is that kind of person, I don't think she's faking it. Look at how sad she is crying. Her eyes are red. Is this Mr. Mac's problem? I'm a little envious. The customers whispered softly with a hint of mockery in their eyes. They wanted to know if Mr. Mac would have to kneel on the washboard on the first day of his wife's return. Wait. Just then, Irina, who had been watching the show silently, suddenly called out to Cynthia, who had already walked to the entrance of the restaurant. Cynthia stopped in her tracks. She closed her eyes and bit her lower lip. Ah. Just a little bit more. Now. What should I do now? Am I going to be torn apart by the main wife? What should I do now? According to the script, as the female lead, all I have to do is pretend to be a weak little white flower and face the main wife's vicious beatings. Then, I have to wait for the male lead to appear and save her. Cynthia's mind was in a mess. She kept one leg up and didn't turn around for a long time. She knew that she wasn't the female lead. Even if Mr. Mac was the male lead, they didn't know each other at all. How could he help her beat up his beautiful wife? Oh. Her actions should be a scheming green tea bitch in the novel. After the female lead returned, she would be a small supporting role used to show off. Ah. So I'm the clown. Cynthia felt like she was going to cry. She didn't know whether to advance or retreat. She didn't know what to do for a moment. Sister, since you're already here, why are you in such a hurry to leave? You've been waiting in line for a long time. Why don't you have your lunch first? Irina walked out from behind the counter and smiled at Cynthia. Cynthia felt an immense pressure. Although this elf lady looked beautiful and generous with a gentle smile, she gave off a terrifying aura like that of a demon. This should be the legendary female lead's aura, right? Cynthia had already cursed herself 1,000,000 times in her heart. Now that she was in front of her, even if she wanted to escape, she might not be able to succeed. I don't have much of an appetite, so I won't eat, Cynthia said weakly. She didn't dare to look Irina in the eye. If you can't find your appetite here, then you won't be able to eat when you leave this place, Irina said with a smile. The customers all nodded in agreement. After entering Mamie's, there was no such thing as not having an appetite. Cynthia couldn't help but want to give a thumbs up. She had stayed up all night and didn't eat in the morning. She had saved her stomach so that she could have a good meal at Mamie's. She wanted to eat her favorite red braised pork and 3 big bowls of rice. She was so hungry that her chest was sticking to her back. It wasn't easy for her to get in line, but when she entered the restaurant, her brain went haywire and she actually dashed to the kitchen and said such embarrassing words. Her hunger didn't disappear, but the shame was too strong. At this moment, she couldn't care less about her hunger. End of chapter. Chapter 23:19. Irina's confrontation with Cynthia successfully piqued the customer's interest. The lady boss who had just returned today bumped into the mistress who was questioning her. Just the title of this drama was enough to make people feel that it was very interesting. Won't the lady boss get mad? I feel like she can crush the boss to death several times with just one finger. Angela gloated. I feel that the lady boss's aura is so strong that it's scary. That lady is completely suppressed. I feel like she can't even speak. Yabamiya smiled. This aura. Why does it feel so familiar? Phyllis blinked and sized up Irina. This fellow is indeed not a good person. He flirted outside. This is his retribution, right? Camilla, on the other hand, was rather excited. She was seriously considering whether she should interfere and make this Azura battlefield even more tragic. I just came back today, so I don't know much about what he has done all these years. However, I believe in his character. If there is any misunderstanding between you and him, or if he has wronged you in any way, I hope that you can tell me. I will make the decision for you. Irina looked at Cynthia and said generously. The restaurant quietened down. The customers who were waiting for the lady boss to flip out heard Irina's words and looked at her with admiration. She could still maintain her composure in such a situation and say such generous words. She did not avoid the question, but she was not biased either. She indeed had the aura of a mistress. When the ladies in the restaurant heard this, they looked at Irina with a different gaze. Although they had only interacted for a while, Irina's words still left a good impression on them. Meg, who wanted to say something, also shut his mouth at this moment. He also looked at Irina with surprise. This lady who liked to reason with others using a folding chair showed such a different side to him for the first time. Cynthia met Irina's gaze. It was a pair of azure blue eyes. They were pure and bright, as if they could see through everything. Her sincere and powerful words made Cynthia feel even more guilty. Although this matter was very embarrassing, it was indeed caused by her mistake. The couple had just reunited, and she had inexplicably interfered with them. She was obviously trying to ruin their relationship. Cynthia bit her lips as her mind raced, trying to find a less embarrassing reason to get herself out of this terrible situation. Irina just looked at her with a smile. Looking at her embarrassed look, she already had some guesses in her heart. Cynthia finally made up her mind. She looked at Irina and said sincerely, "I'm sorry, I was dizzy and thought I was dreaming. Then I rushed up and said those words. Actually, Mr. Mack might not even recognize me." After saying that, her face turned even redder. It was too embarrassing. "I don't want to go out for the rest of my life. This was simply a public execution. Furthermore, he was the one who did it." The restaurant was quiet for a while, and the guests looked at Cynthia with strange gazes. The case was solved just like that. An ignorant girl confessing her love to Mr. Mack in a ridiculous dream. It didn't seem like what they had imagined. If that was the case, what was Mr. Mack to her? Sigh. Looking at this girl, I feel like I'm in her shoes. Women should love themselves more. A girl clutched her chest and looked at Cynthia with pity. Yeah, what's wrong with liking someone? If you like him so much that you can't even tell the difference between a dream and reality, then it must be true love. The girl next to her nodded and even took out a silk handkerchief to wipe the corners of her eyes. Although the guests thought it was ridiculous, they also felt sorry for Cynthia. Although she was wrong, at least this girl was honest. She didn't make a scene and didn't continue to smear Mr. Mack's reputation. Meg's heart raced, but he didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at Cynthia. What was this? Could it be that in her heart, she had already imagined that he would confess to her and marry no one else but her? I see. Looks like you need to have a good meal and then go back to rest. Irina nodded thoughtfully. Looking at Cynthia's tired face and the obvious dark circles under her eyes, she smiled and said, I got it. Let's leave it at that. Sit down and eat first. Don't worry about anything else. Cynthia actually wanted to leave this place as soon as possible, but under Irina's gentle gaze, she couldn't move her feet. Grumble, her stomach let out an honest growl. Forget it. Jingxi is dead anyway. Could there be anything worse than this? Even if I have to go back and shut myself in, I should at least eat today's red braised pork first. Cynthia thought in her heart and suddenly felt relieved. A dead pig wasn't afraid of boiling water. She nodded at Irina and went back to her original seat. "Hello, I'd like 2 portions of red braised pork and 6 bowls of rice," Cynthia said to Mia. Life was already so difficult. She just wanted to eat more rice to calm herself down. Cynthia stared at the map on the wall beside her. Her mind was blank and her face was expressionless. As long as she didn't feel embarrassed, others would be embarrassed. Sure enough, the restaurant was quiet for a while, and no one spoke. Meg didn't want to talk either. He turned and went into the kitchen to make red braised pork for her. However, the raised corner of his mouth showed that he was in a good mood at the moment. Yes, for the first time, he felt the feeling of being protected by his wife. If he were to explain this kind of thing, it would only make things worse. Even if it turned out that what the girl said was false, it would only give him a reputation of being a scumbag. However, Irina's handling of the matter made things clear and cleared his name. It could be said that it was very successful public relations. She is indeed my wife, Meg thought in his heart. That's it. Camilla blinked and looked at Cynthia, who was already waiting for the dishes to be served. Her eyebrows were almost twisted into a knot. Originally, she was looking forward to a fierce battle. She didn't expect that the combat power of this side was so weak that it was defeated without even a round. Miss Caroline is so amazing. She is indeed the boss's wife, Phyllis said in admiration. She was the most clumsy with words. If she encountered such a thing, she wouldn't know how to deal with it. Then she naturally thought of her princess. If the princess encountered such a thing, she would greet with a chair first, right? Just as she got up, the chair would arrive before her voice. Yes, it's amazing. Mia nodded and looked at Irina with admiration. Chapter 23:20. Irina's return was like a small stone being tossed into the calm lake of Mamie restaurant, causing ripples to form on the surface. After the busy business hours ended, the ladies cleaned up the restaurant and left one after another. And brought little Guy out to draw, but they didn't go far. They were in the square outside the restaurant. And sat by the fountain and sketched. Little Guy was holding a sugar figurine in her hand and sitting on a chair by the fountain. Her little legs were swinging as she stared curiously at the grandpa who was making sugar figurines. She didn't spend any money on this sugar figurine. She got it with her face. However, the grandpa didn't lose anything. The little girl was eating the sugar figurine at the side. Her cute appearance attracted a lot of attention, and made the grandpa's business, which wasn't very popular, busy all of a sudden. Gina wasn't in a hurry to leave. She closed the door gently, looked at Irina, and said sincerely, "Miss Caroline, there's something I need to explain to you. Actually, little Guy isn't Mr. Meg's child." Mr. Meg agreed to let little Guy acknowledge him as her father out of kindness. "I hope this won't cause you to misunderstand Mr. Meg's character. He's not a casual man." Irina smiled and nodded. "Thank you for clearing my doubts. If that's the case, I don't mind little Guy continuing to call him father. You can do that before you find someone you really like, or before you're ready to leave Mama's." "Thank you very much." A smile appeared on Gina's face. She had already thought about it. She didn't plan to leave Mama's for the rest of her life. Then I won't disturb you." Gina glanced at Meg, turned around, and walked toward the door. Although she really liked Mr. Meg, Miss Caroline was his lover after all. She was also Amy's mother. She was here first. "Do you think Gina didn't recognize me?" Irina looked at Meg and asked. Meg thought for a moment and said, "Actually, she's very simple-minded. Maybe it's hard for her to switch between 2 characters in the same scene." Irina nodded thoughtfully. Then, she smiled and said, "However, I didn't expect you to be so charming. You can actually make a young lady fall head over heels for you. She even dreams of marrying you. That woman is not a good person." Meg complained in his heart. His clean reputation had almost been ruined by her. It can't be helped. A man who is focused on one thing is so charming. Meg sighed softly and looked up at the sky with a melancholy expression. "I think it's fun to be the lady boss. It's so interesting to see those women's faces when they can't get what they want." Irina sat down behind the counter and smiled. Seeing her like this, Mag confirmed that she really liked this identity. At least, that was the case for now. "I also think that you have the aura of a lady boss. It's enough to intimidate those rascals." Meg flattered her at the right time. Chapter 23-21. Why did she suddenly come back? Didn't Mr. Max say he doesn't have a wife? It's been 3 years. There hasn't been any news from her for 3 years. Her husband and child almost ended up on the streets. Why did she suddenly come back? Could it be that she heard Mr. Mac made a fortune, so she came back on her own accord? A woman like her can only be a vain woman. How can she be worthy of our Mr. Mac? Vivian sat in the carriage and muttered to herself. If she didn't have classes this afternoon, she would have rushed to Mamie's to see what that woman looked like. This feeling was like a candy that she had been craving for a long time. Just as she was about to touch it, it was suddenly snatched away by someone. It was too unbearable. She had even thought about how to hold Luna's wedding. She could even be the bridesmaid and freeload every day. She couldn't be happier. In the end, Mr. Mac's wife came back. The woman who had never appeared at Mamie's, the woman who had given little Amy her adorable looks, came back. If Luna hears this news, she will be very sad, right? Vivian couldn't help but worry. Although she didn't say it, how could Vivian not see that her best friend had special feelings for Mr. Mac? Whenever she looked at him, her eyes would light up. Whenever she talked about him while chatting, she would unconsciously blush. This was clearly a love that couldn't be hidden, but every time she saw him, she would be serious and keep a distance. Now that Mr. Mac's wife came back, what should she do? No. I can't let Luna know about this for now. I'll go check it out tonight and see what kind of woman she is, Vivian thought to herself. What's there to miss in this world? Why don't I just stab myself to death? Cynthia banged her head on the desk, making a loud thud. Ouch. It hurts. She quickly covered her forehead and straightened up. Rubbing her forehead with reddened eyes, she said angrily, "Is there no way to die more comfortably in this world?" At this time, it had only been an hour since her death. She calmly returned to her home, thinking that she could calmly let this matter go. However, as she sat in front of her desk and looked at the erotic words that she had just written on the paper last night, those "Boss Mag" were like knives stabbing her wounds that had just healed and scabbed up again. This is too shameful. How am I going to face people in the future? Cynthia covered her face and shed tears of shame. The more pleasure he had last night, the more shameful he felt now. As a veteran of small H novels, she thought that she had long lost her sense of shame. However, it wasn't until today that she realized how wrong she was. What she lost was not her sense of shame, but the blurring of the boundary between reality and imagination. Once someone clearly displayed this boundary in front of her and dealt her a blow in reality, it would be a blow to her heart. The sense of shame multiplied several times in an instant. After all, no matter how much she wrote on paper, it couldn't hide the fact that she was still an ignorant young girl in reality. She had only been lucky enough to observe the positions that she had skillfully used on paper in a picture book. Is the Northwest Lone Wolf home? It's time to hand in the manuscript today. Hand in the manuscript quickly. The blade is at the door. If I don't see the manuscript tonight, I'll call someone to tear down the house. At this moment, there was a fierce knock on the door, followed by a manic voice. Cynthia immediately shut up and tilted her head to listen for movement outside the door. After a while, when she was sure that there was no sound outside, she slowly stood up and gently opened the door. There was a knife stuck in the door, emitting an eerie aura. What grudge? Didn't I just delay the manuscript for half a month? Is there a need to use a knife? Cynthia reached out and grabbed the knife, using a lot of strength to pull it out of the door. The Northwest Lone Wolf was her pen name. As an author who cared about her reputation, she didn't want people to know that the author of these stories was actually a beautiful and cute girl. Over the years, the pen name Northwest Lone Wolf had become somewhat famous in the circle. However, as an author who was lazy, indifferent and obsessed with sleeping, her output wasn't high, and procrastinating had become a normal occurrence. Because of this, the magazine company that she signed with actually sent an editor to supervise her submission of the manuscript. From the very beginning, she used gentle food to seduce her. Later, she used coercion and bribery. Now, she directly attacked her and stabbed her in the back. She couldn't figure out how that gentle fat sister had become like this step by step. Clang! Cynthia entered the door and casually threw the knife into the basket behind the door, making a crisp sound when it collided with the full number of knives inside. Over the years, when she didn't have money to eat, she relied on selling blades to get through the most difficult period. What do I do now? I can't face this article at all. I can't face the words Mr. Mac anymore. Cynthia sat back at the desk and looked at the paper in front of her with a twisted expression. The story of the pure love between little Axian and Mr. Mac had just reached the climax and was about to come to an end. Next, Mr. Mac would marry little Axian, and the two of them would live a shameless life together. Being shameless was the main point. She could write tens of thousands of words here. But that was about as far as it went. Although the editor repeatedly said that the story was selling well and asked her to find a way to extend it, as an author with integrity, she was ready to end it. But now, she felt that she couldn't finish the last few thousand words. As soon as she picked up the pen, the strong sense of shame made her scalp tingle. She sat at the desk for an hour, and just as she was about to pack up and run away, a light flashed in her mind. Yes, the lady boss is back. The lady boss is back. Then I can steal it. Cynthia felt a sudden electric current in her mind, and the sense of shame and the hole in her brain began to fight fiercely. Originally, the plot should have ended there, but if the lady boss suddenly returned at this time, it would be tantamount to increasing the intensity of the story. Who would Mr. Mac choose? Of course it would be the lady boss. She was so beautiful, elegant, and had a great body. That was how it was in reality, but wasn't it to change reality? Even if she couldn't beat him directly, she could steal it. This was a shameful book, and any setting that could increase the sense of shame was a good setting. The beautiful lady boss was back, and it was inevitable that she would do it with Mr. Mac. Here was another 10,000 words. After doing it, Mr. Mac thought of little Axian, that cute girl. After a struggle between heaven and earth, he chose to meet her secretly on a rainy night. This was amazing. Daddy's Restaurant in the alternate world will continue to update on the handwriting bar. There are no advertisements on the website, so please bookmark and recommend the handwriting bar. If you like Daddy's Restaurant in the alternate world, please bookmark it. Daddy's Restaurant in the alternate world updates the fastest in the handwriting bar. Chapter 23-22. Meg brewed a pot of tea and sat opposite Irina. As they chatted, they talked about the weight loss tea. Meg poured a cup of tea for Irina and asked curiously, "Ashley is very responsible. She personally led a team to the Demon Islands. I wonder if the improvement has been successful." As long as it was something that could make a woman beautiful, there was no need to worry that it would not sell well. Tofu pudding was proof of this. Moreover, weight loss was not only a problem for women. It had a large market for both men and women, old and young. This morning, she let me try a new flavor of weight loss tea. She made 3 flavors: coconut milk, orange juice, and apple juice. The texture and taste are very good. It no longer has the previous taste that was hard to swallow. It's more like pure fruit juice. Irina smiled and said, "Moreover, it retains half of the weight loss effects." Amazing! Meg's eyes lit up. According to what Irina said, this was definitely a weight loss tea that would explode in popularity after it was launched. Although the weight loss effects were halved, the better taste and texture determined that it would be able to obtain a larger market. When do you plan to officially mass produce and launch it to the public? Meg asked. Currently, the biggest problem is how to preserve it. As it's freshly squeezed fruit juice, the freshness period is very short. It can't be stored and sold like wine. Irina shook her head. This was the most troublesome problem for Ashley's team at the moment. Freshly squeezed fruit juice is a very good selling point in itself. At the same time, it can also reasonably increase the unit price. Meg smiled and said, "You can set up a small shop that specializes in selling weight loss fruit juice. There will be no seats, or only a small number of simple booths. You can sell freshly squeezed fruit juice to the public. Through the rapid increase in volume, you can earn huge profits." A restaurant that specializes in selling weight loss tea. Irina frowned. She felt that this was a very novel suggestion. Yes. This model is actually very simple. It doesn't require a big shop front. However, you must find a place with a lot of human traffic and adopt a multi-point strategy. Through standardized production processes, centralized purchasing of raw materials, and other means, you can reduce costs. Furthermore, you have the current market monopoly and reap huge profits. As Meg spoke, he took out a pen and paper and did some calculations for Irina. Milk tea shops were everywhere on Earth in his previous life. The Norland continent had already secured the ticket to peace for the next 100 years. Its economy was booming, and its business model would also change accordingly. At least, Meg felt that launching a milk tea shop in Chaos City would be completely acceptable to the market. Furthermore, it would be able to take off with the selling point of the weight loss tea. One had to know that Mia's ice cream shop already had a daily turnover of over 30,000 copper coins. The initial target of the weight loss tea, which had the effect of losing weight, was women who cared about their figures the most. The commercial value of women was the greatest in the entire consumer market. They had considerable spending power and were willing to pay for beauty. It would cost a fortune to transport fresh fruits from the Demon Islands to Chaos City. Thankfully, fruits weren't seafood, so there were many ways to keep them fresh. If the night elves planned to do this business for a long time, they could set up their own transportation team to be responsible for the transportation of fruits. The transportation cost would be greatly reduced. Moreover, the fruit flavor in the weight loss juice was mainly used for flavoring. The cost of a single cup of juice was actually limited. Meg did a simple calculation. The material cost of a cup of weight loss juice was about 15 copper coins. The cost of labor and rent would have to be allocated to a cup of milk tea according to the sales volume. Therefore, we will earn less from this cup of weight loss juice. We will sell it at 100 copper coins per cup. We will earn some hard-earned money and build up our reputation first. Meg put down the calculator. If a shop can sell 1,000 cups of weight loss juice a day, then the turnover of a single shop would be 100,000 copper coins. If we open 10 shops in Chaos City, then the turnover of this business would be between 500,000 to 1 million copper coins a day. Irina looked at Meg and pondered seriously for a while. Then, she shockingly said, "That's more profitable than your restaurant." "I never opened a restaurant to earn money." Meg smiled. Mana Hot Pot Restaurant's turnover is already much higher than Amy's now. Reina is still planning for a second and third branch, as well as opening up markets in other cities. But, are you sure this will really work? Will people spend 100 copper coins just because you say this is weight loss tea? Irina was still unconvinced. She had also discussed the selling price with Ashley in the morning. The cost was about the same as Meg's estimation. They planned to sell it at 20 copper coins and earn 5 copper coins per cup. That was the real hard-earned money, all right. They didn't even dare to think about selling it at 100 copper coins per cup. That was simply profiteering. However, thinking about it this way, this was the way to earn big bucks. After all, the night elves had tens of thousands of mouths to feed. Earning 5 copper coins per cup was not even enough for everyone to eat coarse grains. First of all, you have to be sure that this is not an ordinary fruit juice. This is a weight loss fruit juice that can make you lose weight and your figure become more beautiful. Moreover, it is made from freshly squeezed fruit juice from the Demon Islands thousands of miles away. Meg smiled and said, "Just these 2 points alone are enough to make it fatally attractive to women. However, what you lack now is a trustworthy brand effect. The most crucial thing is whether you can attract the first batch of customers and bring about a good reputation through the effects of their drinking. From there, you can achieve the effect of word of mouth. So, what should we do?" Irina humbly asked for advice. "It's very simple. I can set up a stall in front of Mamie's as a warm-up. Mamie will endorse you. As long as you can get this batch of high-quality customers from Mamie's, you won't have to worry about sales," Meg said calmly as he crossed his hands on the table. Irina was stunned for a moment before she smiled. "That's really cheating. Opening a back door for my wife isn't considered cheating." Meg shook his head slightly. "But before that, I need to be sure that your weight loss juice can meet my requirements. Be it the taste, effect, or packaging, I need to personally verify it." "No problem. I'll make a trip to the textile factory and let Ashley talk to you personally." Irina nodded. She took a sip of tea and got up to leave. Ding! Just then, the bell at the door suddenly rang out. Irina tilted her head and looked out of the floor-to-ceiling window. A playful smile appeared on her face. She sat back down in her seat and said with a smile, "Your outstanding business partner has come to look for you. Since you're so close to each other, as the lady boss, shouldn't I get to know her?" Chapter 23-23. It was Gloria. She was probably here to talk about spring clothing. Meg stood up and walked towards the door with a smile. "I should introduce you to each other." Meg opened the door. "Mr. Meg, I'm sorry to bother you again." Gloria's sweet voice rang out. She had a sweet smile on her delicate and quiet face. Her hands were behind her back. "You haven't come to the restaurant for a while. The shop must be very busy recently, right?" Meg smiled. He had a good impression of this ambitious girl. He felt like he had raised her into a strong career woman. "Yes, we're rushing out the last batch of winter clothing. We have to deliver it to the customers before the end of winter. At least they can wear it once this year." Gloria nodded. Her smile was relaxed and playful. It looks like it's all finished. Meg smiled. Yes, it's all finished today. We gave the workers and craftsmen annual leave. Gloria nodded with a smile. So, I'm here today to talk to Mr. Meg about spring clothing. Before spring comes, we need to prepare the first batch of goods in advance. Come in. Have a cup of tea and we'll talk. Meg had already expected this. He stepped aside and let her in. Gloria took a step forward, but stopped. She looked up at Meg. Her face was slightly red. She bit her lips and wanted to say something. Meg looked at the shy girl in front of him. His heart skipped a beat. She couldn't be. No, no. Irina was still sitting inside. She was about to catch him red-handed. If Gloria caused trouble, it would be difficult to clean up the mess. In the restaurant, Irina's lips curled into a cold smile. She slowly tightened her grip on the back of the chair beside her. Gloria took out the hand behind her back. She blushed and handed it to Meg. She looked down and didn't dare to look at him. She whispered, "This is a small gift from me. Thank you for your help during this time." Oh, it turns out to be a gift. Meg heaved a sigh of relief, but inexplicably felt a little disappointed. There's no need to be so polite. I'll accept it then. Meg smiled and took the paper bag. The bag was open, and a touch of green was particularly bright. It seemed to be a scarf. Meg's eyelids twitched, and he quickly closed the bag, afraid that Irina would overthink. I've been knitting since winter, but I'm clumsy, so I only finished today, Gloria said, a little embarrassed. It's okay. At least I can tie it again before winter ends, Meg said with a smile. He knew how busy Gloria was, but she still took the time to knit a scarf for him. He couldn't accept her kindness. Gloria smiled as well. Her heart felt warm. She looked up at Meg again. Her gaze was gentle and moist. Mr. Meg was still a gentle person. Hubby, who is this lady? At this moment, a voice came from the dining room. Hubby? Gloria was taken aback. She looked into the dining room and saw an elf in a blue dress standing up from her seat. She was looking at the door with a smile. What a beautiful elf. Gloria's eyes lit up slightly. She could only see her impeccable facial features in the mirror, and her tailored dress accentuated her slender waist and voluptuous breasts. Even though she was a woman, she was still stunned by her beauty. But, what did she mean when she said, hubby? Hubby, could it be? Gloria's eyes widened. She noticed the elf's beautiful azure eyes. They were as clear and ethereal as the sky. Little Amy also had a pair of eyes like that. She suddenly realized something. This elf should be little Amy's mother. She was the lady boss who had never appeared at Amy's before, nor had she appeared in Mr. Meg's. Gloria felt as if her heart had been struck by something. She was a little dazed, and even her ears were ringing. It was an uncomfortable feeling. So Mr. Meg's wife didn't pass away like the rumors said. She was here, and she was so beautiful. Then she caught a glimpse of the gift bag in Meg's hand. Her face instantly turned red. Her lips moved, but she didn't know what to say. Giving a scarf that she knitted herself in front of someone's wife. She actually did something like that. This is Gloria, the owner of Suede Clothing. She's my friend and also a very close business partner. Meg introduced Irina. He closed the door and introduced her to Gloria. This is my wife, Caroline. Hello. Gloria nodded slightly at Irina. When she heard Meg say, wife, her heart was touched. Your hair is so beautiful. Meg often talks about you. Irina smiled at Gloria. There wasn't any hostility in her eyes. Instead, it was more of admiration. Irina didn't refuse to admit that Gloria was indeed a very beautiful girl. Her delicate facial features were more mature than the average girl, but she still radiated a youthful aura. She heard Meg talk about Gloria. She went from an autistic girl to a rising star in the business world in just a few months. She quite admired her temperament and ability. Your appearance is even more stunning. Gloria smiled. Her mood was a little complicated, but she had already calmed down. Sit down and talk, Meg said. Gloria said hesitantly. I won't disturb you guys talking about work. I was just about to go out. Before Gloria could say anything, Irina was already walking towards the door. When she walked past Gloria, she smiled at her and said, You guys take your time. Stay for dinner tonight. Then, Irina looked at Meg and said, Treat her well. Then, before the two could say anything, she opened the door and walked out like the hostess of the house. Meg and Gloria stood awkwardly at the door. Have a seat. I prepared 10 spring outfits. See if they fit. Meg broke the silence and walked towards the counter. Gloria looked at Meg's back and clenched her fists. She walked to the table with the tea set. She glanced at the chair Irina was sitting in and sat down next to it. Yes, she was here to talk to Mr. Meg about spring outfits. Work was more important. Suede was still waiting for this batch of spring outfits. Chapter 23-24. When it came to work, Gloria quickly immersed herself in it. Meg's so-called lack of preparation still shocked Gloria greatly. There was a loose and comfortable cotton dress, a smart suit, a pleated skirt, a slim and thin trench coat. Every outfit had its own unique characteristics, and Gloria was struck by a sense of novelty. She didn't even need to produce the final product. Just by looking at the design on the paper, she was sure that these 10 outfits would sell out. You're really a fashion design genius, Gloria praised Meg from the bottom of her heart. She didn't hide her admiration at all. Even though he was a busy person, he still managed to complete this series of outfits so well. It's just a hobby. Meg smiled casually. Then he thought about it and realized that it wasn't appropriate for him to design women's clothing as a hobby, so he added, I really appreciate women's beauty. After that, Meg regretted it even more. Wasn't he being a pervert? However, Gloria didn't seem to think that there was anything wrong with his words. Instead, she admired him even more. Not everyone had eyes that could see a woman's beauty, let alone turn that appreciation into beautiful outfits. Meg rolled up the design and put it aside. He poured Gloria a cup of tea and took a sip himself. Gloria held the warm teacup and gently blew at the dense steam. She didn't speak for a long time. Meg silently drank the tea and thought about what this girl might be thinking. He was about to say something to break the silence. Your wife. Did she just come back? Gloria looked up at Meg and suddenly asked. Meg was slightly surprised. He looked into Gloria's eyes and nodded slightly. Yes, she just came back today. Gloria's face showed a trace of a smile. Yes, she guessed right. She just came back. It wasn't that Mr. Meg intentionally hid her existence. After all, Mr. Meg had never talked about her, but he had never told anyone that he was single, and she had never seen him behave inappropriately with anyone of the opposite sex. So she's not leaving? Gloria asked again. This question was a little strange. Meg thought for a moment before nodding. Yes, she said she's not leaving. Thank you very much for the blueprint. Once the sample is ready, I will send it to the restaurant for you to take a look. Thank you for your time today. Gloria stood up with a smile and left with the blueprint. Goodbye. Meg sent her to the door and watched as she walked out of the restaurant with relaxed steps. She walked towards the carriage, and at the moment she boarded the carriage, there seemed to be drops of water flowing down her cheeks. Meg slowly closed the door and pretended not to see anything. Back to Suede. Gloria's nasal voice came from inside the carriage. The carriage started moving slowly. Gloria sniffled and wiped the tears off her cheeks. She hugged the blueprint tightly and whispered to herself, "Let's get back to work. As long as we work hard, we won't have to think about anything else." The news of the return of Mamie's lady boss had become the hottest topic among the regulars at Mamie's. Mr. Mack was the man that all the ladies in Chaos City wanted to marry the most. His image as a bachelor collapsed instantly, and many ladies were sad. Of course, among the sadness, there was also the regret of not being able to eat delicious food for free. And the gossip about the mysterious lady boss had also become the focus of everyone's attention. Everyone was very curious. Why did the lady boss leave Mr. Mack and little Amy back then? Was there a secret behind it? And why did she suddenly come back now? Men always had a good tolerance for beautiful women. When they sent their blessings to Mr. Mack's family reunion, they said in their hearts, "Your wife is really good." On the other hand, women were a little more harsh toward beautiful women. Luckily, Irina's strong aura and frightening power were enough to stop people from gossiping. She's a 10th-tier magic caster, and she's so beautiful. She's even willing to bear his children. If Mr. Mack doesn't choose her, is he really going to choose you guys? Harrison analyzed the situation for Georgina softly. Is the lady boss really that beautiful? Does she look like little Amy? Georgina asked Harrison expectantly. She was Amy's fan, and she really liked the little boss. Yes. Harrison nodded with a smile, and said, "I've been wondering how Mr. Mack could have such an adorable daughter. But after seeing the lady boss today, I finally understood. It really has nothing to do with Mr. Mack. She inherited her mother's beauty. Is Mr. Mack the ugliest in a family of 4? Georgina covered her mouth and giggled. But even so, Mr. Mack is still super charming. Compared to me. Harrison tilted his head. That's still not enough. Georgina hooked her arm around his, and smiled with her eyes. That's more like it. Harrison was very pleased, and smiled brightly. TSK, TSK. I have goosebumps all over my body. I can't listen to this anymore, George said with disdain as he hugged his little daughter, who was sleeping with a pacifier in his arms. Look at how happy she is. You haven't said anything like this to me in a long time. Miranda reached out and patted George's shoulder lightly with a smile. If you ask me, my wife is the most beautiful in the world, George said to Miranda, who was hugging his little son, with a loving expression. A sweet smile appeared on Miranda's face, and there was even a hint of shyness. Father, you'd better go home first, Palmer, who was standing at the side, said with disdain. He couldn't stand it anymore. Where's Big Sister Amy? I like Big Sister Amy. Parber turned his head and looked around, looking for his target. The lady boss is indeed back. This is really bad news. Vivian hid in the line and eavesdropped on the customers' discussion. She had run away after class today, and deliberately didn't invite Luna to come with her. She wanted to find out if the rumors were true. Was the lady boss really as beautiful as the rumors said? She was conflicted, but after hearing the customers' discussion, she had to admit that the lady boss might really be very beautiful. There was a long line outside the door, and everyone was having dinner in the restaurant. Irina still didn't come, because Caroline came. The customers outside are going crazy because the lady boss is back. Boss, you're indeed a top celebrity. Barbara looked at Meg and gave him a thumbs up. Meg raised his eyebrows. He had also heard a lot of strange rumors, but it wasn't appropriate for him to make an announcement. After all, he wasn't a celebrity, and he didn't have any obligation to be honest with the customers, so he just let them guess. Chapter 23-25. Meg didn't reply. Instead, it was Irina who curiously asked, "What are they arguing about?" "Lady boss, you don't know about this. Before you came back, our boss was a famous eligible bachelor in Chaos City. He could be said to be the man that all the women in Chaos City wanted to marry the most." There was a line from the restaurant's entrance all the way to the city gate, Angela interjected. "Today is a heartbreaking day for these ignorant young ladies. In that case, I have unintentionally hurt many people." Irina sighed softly, but her gaze landed on Meg. Meg, who was eating with his head lowered, paused. He looked up with a resigned smile, and gently said, "It's not your fault. If you want to blame someone, you can only blame my damn charm." The restaurant fell silent for a while before bursting into laughter. The ladies were quite accepting of Irina's return, at least for now. Irina carried out her previous plan perfectly. She didn't care about anything, didn't do anything, and didn't say anything. She was like a beautiful vase, waiting quietly. Apart from adding some beauty to the restaurant and increasing the topic of conversation, it didn't affect the restaurant's operation at all. Irina was happy to be a vase. She just liked the feeling of being the lady boss. She didn't really want to control everything in the restaurant. It would be too tedious and boring if she were to manage everything. Shouldn't the lady boss only need to be in charge of being pretty? If she had to manage everything, she would just be an employee who didn't need money. The restaurant was open for business, and Irina sat behind the counter, watching and teach the two little ones how to draw with a peaceful smile on her face. Amy had no talent in this aspect. She could only turn a little duckling into a round ugly duckling, but it was still a little cute. However, she didn't have enough talent, and wasn't very malleable. On the other hand, little Guai was sitting in front of the little table, holding a pen with one hand strenuously. Her drawing was very methodical, and the lines were very lively. The customers entered the restaurant, and couldn't help but take a few glances at Irina, who was sitting behind the counter. Seeing that the elves were indeed as beautiful as the rumors said, and even more beautiful than they had imagined, they finally gave up and sat down, silently ordering their food. So beautiful. Vivian looked at Irina, who was sitting behind the counter and looking down at the children. She suddenly stopped in her tracks and opened her mouth slightly with a shocked expression on her face. She was simply too beautiful. She had an exquisite and impeccable appearance, a gentle temperament, and a graceful figure that was difficult to conceal even when sitting down. She was simply a natural beauty. She also had a pair of azure blue eyes that were almost the same as Amy's. Oh no, Luna has met a strong opponent this time. Vivian came back to her senses and found a seat. She picked up the menu on the table, but her eyes were still sneaking glances at Irina behind the counter. No matter how one looked at it, her face was impeccable. Moreover, the gentleness in her eyes when she looked at Amy couldn't lie. Sometimes, her mother would look at her in the same way, emitting a motherly glow. Just from this point alone, the master-disciple relationship between Luna and Amy was not worth mentioning. Although she really wanted to help Luna, at this moment, she felt that her opponent was very powerful. It was the kind of crushing, making her feel very powerless. How should I tell Luna later? She'll probably be very sad, right? Sigh. It's all Mr. Mac's fault. He has a wife. Why? It doesn't seem like he did anything wrong. Sigh. Vivian bit her lip, feeling very conflicted. Is that the boss's wife? She's really beautiful. As expected of little Amy's mother. Georgina held Harrison's hand as they walked in. Her eyes lit up when she saw Irina, and she whispered, "Don't worry." "I told you I wasn't lying," Harrison said with a smile. "Yes, yes." Georgina nodded, and said enviously, "I'm really envious of Mr. Mac. He can hug two beauties to sleep at night, one big and one small. When he wakes up, he'll definitely wake up smiling. In that case, I'm still short of a little beauty before I can reach Mr. Mac's level of happiness," Harrison said as he looked at Georgina's tummy. "Fuck you." Georgina blushed and punched him in the chest. Irina's return gave the customers more things to talk about. However, most of the customers came to Mamie's for the good food and wine. The return of rum gave the customers another choice, and the relatively low price coupled with the high quality of the wine made rum the choice of many customers. Hannah's distillery's production capacity had already caught up, and now it didn't take much effort to supply Mamie's and Titan Tavern. In order to expand his influence, Meg started to try to sell rum to the public. Customers who spent money at Mamie's could buy up to 3 bottles of rum at the checkout. Not every business deal could let the customers queue outside a restaurant for 1 or 2 hours first. And a good bottle of rum could often increase the chances of a business deal. Titan Tavern. The brightly lit tavern was already full of customers, and there was still a queue outside the door waiting to enter. Meanwhile, across the road, Saipan Tavern was also full of customers, and business was booming. In just 1 or 2 months, Titan Tavern and Saipan Tavern had become famous taverns in Rodu, and their reputations were excellent. Titan's rum, which had returned after a few years of silence, was both nostalgic and delicious. People loved it so much that they couldn't put it down. What was even more surprising was that Titan Tavern launched a new brand of rum a few days ago. Although this rum wasn't brewed by Titan Tavern's boss himself, it was brewed by Old Sim's granddaughter, the famous brewer of the Falk tribe, Hannah. Ever since Old Sim passed away, the quality of rum on the market was uneven, and many flavors were hard to describe. Although Hannah was young, she had inherited Old Sim's brewing skills, and the rum she brewed wasn't inferior to Old Sim's at all. Titan Tavern's boss was very resourceful, and actually got the exclusive right to sell rum in Rodu. Apart from Titan Tavern, there was no other place to drink such high-quality rum. A tavern supported by 2 types of premium rum, and coupled with the constantly updated delicacies, Titan Tavern had already become a name card in Rodu's tavern world. Meanwhile, Effie's name was also well known in the tavern world. As for Saipan Tavern, it was much colder. Moutai and whiskey made people forget to leave. Although the prices were rather high, they were still highly sought after by many customers. Moreover, there were rumors in the pugilistic world recently that this tavern was also managed by Effie now, and that made Effie and that Saipan Tavern's boss a topic of conversation. Chapter 23-26. See you tomorrow. Meg and Irina stood at the entrance of the restaurant as they watched the ladies leave. Angela looked back at Meg and Irina, and teased, "I'm afraid the restaurant will shake a little tonight." "What's wrong? Is there going to be an earthquake?" Barbara asked innocently. "Maybe." Angela nodded. Then, she looked at Barbara with a smile. "Are you scared? Do you want me to sleep with you tonight?" "I refuse." Barbara shook her head resolutely. Her eyes were filled with vigilance. "Sister Gina." Angela turned to Gina. Gina used her eyes to signal Lil Guai, who was already asleep in her arms. She smiled and said, "Not in the future. I have to sleep with Lil Guai. Lil Guai is so lucky. Sister Gina's hug is the warmest." Angela looked at Lil Guai enviously. However, she still caressed her head lovingly. The lady boss seems like a very nice person. She's beautiful and generous, and she treats us well, Yabamiya said with a smile. Yeah, I think she's nice too. She didn't order us around the moment she came. She just stayed quietly. It didn't affect our work at all. Shirley nodded. Also, I think she has a great aura. I've never met her before, but I feel like I've known her for a long time, Phyllis said with surprise. Everyone chatted as they returned to the dormitory. Irina's official return as Caroline didn't have any substantial impact on the restaurant's operation. The biggest impact was probably the decrease in the number of girls and young women who were throwing flirtatious glances at Meg. That did lessen his burden. The number of customers in the restaurant was still the same. After all, the girls' fantasies were pulled back to reality, but it didn't affect them from using delicacies to soothe their hurt hearts. The 10,000 copies of The Mermaid's Tale were sold out very quickly. Meg wasn't in a hurry to print more copies, nor did he print a new album for Anne. However, The Mermaid's picture book was very popular. Customers often came to ask if there would be more copies, and if Anne's other picture books were available for sale. Facts had proven that there was a vast market for high-quality picture books. The stock of A Miss Black Cat was running low again, so Meg printed another 10,000 copies and sent them to Rodu for Eiffel. Chaos City's market couldn't be compared to the Roth Empire's market at all. Regardless of whether it was the mega city of Rodu or the dozens of large cities in the Roth Empire, they could all handle a large number of high-quality picture books. The story of Miss Black Cat was excellent enough, and with Anne's excellent drawing and color printing, it was easy to imagine how well it could spread. Meg had just spent some money to buy some information a few days ago. Currently, in the circle of nobles in Rodu, whether or not one had a copy of Ms. Black Cat had already become a measure of whether or not one was trendy enough. There were many people who had purchased multiple copies as part of their collections. For the children of the noble families who were bound by all kinds of rules, the story of breaking through the shackles and cages of their families and identities to create a new world had a natural sense of immersion. Compared to the common stories told by storytellers, this kind of story with the young mistress of a noble family as the main character was simply too rare. It was simply a template for a refreshing novel. Meg had chosen to buy the copyright of Miss Black Cat back then because of this consideration. He had a clear target audience, so he didn't have to worry about sales. The sales of the picture books were booming, so the traffic of the Black Cat song troupe shouldn't be too bad. Meg planned to make a trip to Rodu in 2 days' time during his rest day. In the next few days, Meg seriously wrote out the outline of A Chinese Ghost Story. After some consideration, Meg changed the female ghost, Little Qian Demon, to the succubus, Little An, from the useless scholar to the useless chef, and from the old demon of the Black Mountain to the old dominator with millions of octopus tentacles. The main storyline was basically unchanged. The incestuous love between a succubus and a chef thus began. Apart from carefully polishing the script, Meg also pulled Barbara to make some changes to the photo stone. The photo stone was a very precious and special stone on the Norland continent. Coupled with a simple spell formation, it could allow the stone to have the ability to record images, as well as the ability to play videos that weren't very clear. However, once the spell formation was activated to leave a new image, the old image would be covered. However, the photo stone had the characteristic of not wearing out much. Even if a photo stone was used repeatedly, it could still be used for a long time. Meg got Barbara to modify the spell formation of the photo stone. It allowed the photo stone to have a directional shooting function. Apart from greatly increasing the storage capacity of the photo stone, it also allowed the photo stone to have a segmented storage function. This had basically fulfilled most of the functions of the camera. As for the playback function, it was limited by the characteristics of the photo stone itself. The clarity couldn't be increased too much. Hence, Meg added a monitor to project the images of the photo stone onto the monitor. This greatly increased the clarity of the video. This monitor technology was actually an old technology. Meg only got Barbara to optimize the spell formation so that the clarity of the video could be greatly improved. For the sake of nostalgia, Meg put the photo stone into a box, leaving a shooting window. The camera was officially born. After taking out the photo stone and putting it into the preset slot of the player could play a moving image. This was the combination of a DVD and a player. With these two things, the art of movies would be able to shine brightly on the Norland continent. Boss, is it really okay for you to torture me day and night like this? Barbara had 2 dark circles under her eyes, and she looked at Mag with resentment. She was the princess of the Moon Nation, but she was actually being used as a coolie. She had to rush through the night to draw up the spell formation, and serve the dishes to the customers in the day. She had never been so tired in her life. Come. Add a big drumstick for supper tonight. Our first set of camera and player products are already out. Half of the patent is yours. If we mass-produce them in the future, you will get a fortune that ordinary people can't imagine. Meg brought a platter of roasted meat and a large golden chicken drumstick over to Barbara with a fawning smile. I now have a fortune that most people can't imagine. Barbara rolled her eyes. She didn't feel anything for Meg's pie, but she still took a bite of the drumstick honestly. Delicious. Barbara squinted her eyes. The roasted drumstick was crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. It won her heart. If it weren't for the fact that her supper was too delicious, she wouldn't have worked so hard to satisfy Mag's weird requests. However, she was still quite interested in the movie that Meg mentioned. Recording the story of a real-life performance into a photo stone, and then using a player to broadcast it to the whole world so that everyone would fall in love with this story. What an exciting idea it sounded. End of chapter. Chapter 23-27. Of course, the main reason was that Meg had promised to make Barbara the female lead in a movie in the future. She had even thought about what to film. It was going to be The Boring Day of the Princess. She wanted the whole world to see how a real princess would wake up in a 500 square meter bed and be dressed by hundreds of maids. Even the floor of the toilet was studded with gems, and it was all lit by luminous pearls. After supper, Meg asked Barbara to engrave arrays on the 3 sets of equipment before letting her go back to rest. Go back to sleep. I'll give you a day off tomorrow. You can sleep until the sky turns dark. Meg looked at her gently. Barbara was twisting her sore wrist. Her eyes lit up when she heard Meg's words. She was touched. Boss, you finally found your conscience. What bad intentions could the boss have? Meg's smile became even gentler. He opened the door for her. Go back to the dorm and sleep. You've worked hard these days. Okay. Barbara nodded and turned to walk out of the door. But when she reached the door, she suddenly stopped and looked back at Meg. Boss, is tomorrow a day off? Yes, sleep well. Meg closed the door with a smile. Bang! The door was obviously kicked. Luckily, it was sturdy and didn't move at all. You black-hearted capitalist! Barbara shouted angrily outside. Looking at the motionless door, she stomped her feet and went back to sleep angrily. She was so sleepy that she couldn't be bothered to argue with him. You tricked Barbara into working for you again. Irina came down in her thin white pajamas as she smiled at Mag, who was tidying up the photo stones on the table like they were his treasures. I prepared supper for her. It's not a free meal, Meg said with a serious face. What are you doing with these things? Irina looked at the things in Meg's hands and asked. Meg had been busy for several days. I'm planning to shoot a movie. Oh, it's powered by magic. It should be called Magic Movie. Meg pointed the camera in his hand at Irina and pressed the record button. Demon Shadow. What's that? Irina asked curiously. It's to record the scene in the real world with a shadow recording stone, and then play it through a player, Meg explained simply. What's so strange about that? Isn't that the function of the shadow recording stone? Irina was puzzled. No, if it's purely recording and broadcasting, it's indeed no different from the shadow recording stone's functions. It's just that the functions have been optimized. Magic film wasn't just about recording images. It was also an art of light and shadow. It had extremely high requirements for shooting angles, scenes, and lighting. Of course, the most important thing was that it was used to tell stories, and not to record daily life. It was just like a picture book, using images to tell stories, Meg explained. Irina pondered for a while, and said, for example, using the shadow recording stone to record Miss Black Cat's opera performance. Meg was surprised at Irina's ability to understand. He nodded with a smile, and said, that's the right idea. It's probably to move Miss Black Cat's opera performance from the stage to the real world, and let the story happen in a real big house. Then, use the shadow recording stone to record the entire performance, and turn it into a more realistic story. That sounds interesting. Irina nodded thoughtfully. However, she still couldn't understand, and asked, so, why do you want to shoot a movie? To add some excitement to the boring daily entertainment of the people of the Norland continent, Meg said with a smile. Speak human language. I intend to set up magic cinemas in all the big cities of the Norland continent. To watch a magic film, you have to sell tickets to enter. Let's say a ticket is sold for 100 copper coins. A magic film that can accommodate 100 people can earn 10,000 copper coins. Moreover, a magic film can be played in different cinemas for a long period of time. In the future, there might be more outstanding directors joining the ranks of the magic film industry, making this industry flourish. I, who have control over the movie broadcasting channels, will be the biggest beneficiary, Meg said honestly. Of course, he was too embarrassed to say that he wanted to become famous. You're indeed worthy of your reputation. Irina looked at Meg with a complicated expression. You can take a look at the imaging results after we've improved it. Meg turned off the camera, took out the shadow recording stone, pressed it into the player, turned it on, and clicked on play. Irina's image appeared in the 55-inch player. The resolution was comparable to 1080p. Her hair was clearly visible, and the details were full. The reproduction of her voice was also very high. It can actually show my beauty so clearly. Irina looked at the image on the player in shock. She actually felt like she was looking into a mirror. This is the charm of technology. Meg smiled like a tech geek. Captain. Our night tickets have been sold out for 2 days in a row. Moreover, 60% of the tickets for tomorrow's morning show have been sold out. I reckon tomorrow's morning show will be full as well. Old Me said excitedly as he walked into the captain's office, and looked at Vicky, who was bent over her desk writing a script. Be more serious. We have a fan club now. Vicky looked up at him, and couldn't hide the smile on her face. I'm just too excited. Our troop has never fought such a rich battle before. Old Me chuckled. He looked at Vicky and said, also, Captain, we've all reached a consensus. We don't want to take a day off every week. So many people like us, so we should perform for them more often. We don't want to take a day off. Vicky's face immediately darkened. She said firmly, no way. I set the rule of taking a day off every 7 days. Everyone has to follow it. Old me didn't expect Vicky to reject him so decisively. He scratched his head and said, Captain, we're just scared of being poor. We have so many people now. If they feel that we're neglecting them, they might stop coming in the future. That would be terrible. Vicky frowned. She looked at old me and said, that's enough. They shouldn't be asleep yet. Go and call them to the conference room. I want to have a few words with everyone. Old me opened his mouth, but swallowed his words in the end. He agreed, and quickly went out to find them. Not long after, everyone from the Black Cat Song Troupe arrived at the conference room. Vicky looked at everyone and said with a smile, I've heard everyone's thoughts from old me. Our troupe has always had a full house these past few days, and everyone still hasn't gotten used to it yet. Yeah. I was a little dazed when I heard the applause from below the stage. When we were leaving the stage, there was even a girl who grabbed my hand and cried. She said that I acted well. Hee, that was such a good feeling. Everyone laughed. They were all quite happy. Chapter 23-28. Vicky listened to everyone with a smile on her face. Only when everyone's voices gradually died down and their gazes focused on her did she retract her smile. So, you don't plan on resting? She asked in a low voice. Captain, we don't need to rest. As long as the guests are happy, performing for an extra day isn't a problem at all. That's right, Captain. It wasn't easy for us to make a name for ourselves. There are so many guests waiting for us to perform. We wish we could just stay on stage. How can we rest? We've already discussed this, and we don't think there's a problem. Everyone nodded in agreement. They were of one mind. Old me opened his mouth, but chose not to say anything. Paw! Vicky suddenly slammed the table. The meeting room immediately fell silent. Everyone's smiles disappeared. They looked at Vicky with shock and confusion. You don't think there's a problem? Vicky looked at everyone coldly. Her eyebrows were already raised. I think there's a huge problem. She said coldly. Captain. Old me said softly. Vicky ignored him. Have you all forgotten what I told you before? An outstanding opera singer doesn't need to curry favor with the audience. All you need to do is perform with all your heart on stage. Are you all going to lose your conscience just because of a little bit of attention? Everyone's expressions changed. Some of them wanted to say something, but no one said anything. Vicky had a disappointed look on her face. I've been warning you ever since I brought you into the industry that your voice is the life of an opera singer. If your throat doesn't get the rest it needs for the sake of short cheers and applause, and if you end up shortening your lifespan, I'll be very disappointed. Everyone gradually lowered their heads, their faces filled with shame. Even though they were of different ages, most of them were older than Vicky. However, Vicky was their guide to becoming opera singers. She was also their master. She helped them rise from the lowest rungs of society with no dreams to become opera singers who could express themselves through their voices and performances. Just as Vicky had said, ever since they entered the industry, she had been telling them how to protect their voices and extend their lifespan. I set the rule of 1 day off a week so that you can give back to the audience in a better state after a day of rest, so that they can enjoy a truly full and outstanding performance. I know what you're thinking, but you should know that the audience likes our wonderful performances on stage, not our daily performances, Vicky said in a deep voice. Everyone had a thoughtful expression on their faces. Leader, we will rest according to our previous plan. We will also do our best to give the audience an even better performance, Old Me stepped forward and promised solemnly. Yes, we won't let you down. We know we were wrong. Everyone also expressed their stance and did not argue. A smile finally appeared on Vicky's face. She nodded slightly and said, "All right, go back to sleep. There's a performance tomorrow morning." After saying that, he turned around and left. Standing at the top of the tower of the Black Cat Opera House, Vicky looked up at the moon that was half covered by the clouds in the sky with a smile on her face. "What are you laughing at? Is that all you've got? I'm getting closer and closer to my dream. What's wrong with laughing? Not only am I going to smile, but I'm also going to laugh out loud. Ha ha ha, all right. Stop laughing. It's embarrassing. I want to laugh. Don't cover my mouth. Enrich, that's my mouth too. If I say you're not allowed to laugh, then don't laugh." A person's strange performance was staged on the top of the tower for a while. Say, don't you think Meg is a little strange? Why? I think Mr. Meg is a very outstanding person. He's so outstanding that he's too freakish. Grandpa said that every world would give birth to a child of the plane after a certain period of time, and that child would receive a lot of providence from heaven and earth. Mr. Meg might be such an existence. The child of providence is said to be lucky, but what's strange about him is that his skills are too perfect. A sword god who forcefully became a demigod in the Norland continent, a forsaken land of the gods, can actually make good dishes that can crush all the chefs in the world. Not only that, but he can also appreciate operas, and is very good at angel investments. He does a good business. His copyright awareness is too advanced, and his ability to operate copyright is too strong. His ability to drive consumption is even more shocking. His methods are not inferior to an excellent business operator. Speaking of which, Mr. Meg is indeed a perfect man. Don't be love-struck. That's another woman's man. So what? Beautiful women love heroes. This is a tradition. Shut up. I'm not that kind of superficial woman. I am. Shut up, shut up, shut up. Enrich, the early tickets for Miss Black Cat are on sale. Starting from 200 copper coins per ticket. Everyone, queue up and buy your tickets in an orderly manner. You can enter the venue directly according to your seat. 1 ticket per show. No refunds or exchanges. Mara stood at the entrance of the opera house and shouted loudly. It was only 8 in the morning, but the line at the entrance of the opera house had already stretched to the entrance of the Titan Tavern. Due to the popularity of the opera, there had been a situation of ticket scalpers selling tickets in the past few days. A ticket that cost 200 copper coins could be sold for 500 copper coins at a time. The price difference was even higher than the price of the ticket itself. Therefore, Vicky thought of a way to sell the tickets on the spot, and then enter the venue directly to watch the performance. This directly eliminated the possibility of the scalpers being a middleman. Of course, the disadvantage of this method was that the audience who wanted to watch the performance might have to queue up a long time in advance. However, this was the only way Vicky could think of at the moment. At least, this would allow the audience who wanted to watch the opera to buy their tickets at a lower price. Mara had already become an official part-time employee of the Black Cat Song Troupe. She was responsible for the ticketing work, and occasionally, she could get a small role without any lines to walk on stage for a while to satisfy her cravings. Of course, there was another reason why Mara was so diligent. After the performance, Mara could also run to the backstage of the opera house and learn from Vicky and the other seniors to sing opera. Although her talent was mediocre, Mara's interest was great. The actors in the opera troupe were also happy to teach her, so she was now considered a beginner. Even the sound of the ticket being sold was a little longer. This girl's voice is getting louder and louder. Evie rubbed her sleepy eyes and opened the window. She looked in the direction of the Black Cat Song Troupe with some disdain. She looked at Mara, who was smiling like a miser, and the corners of her mouth could not help but curl up a little. She looked away and was about to close the window when her gaze fell on the few figures in the long line. Chapter 23-29. Isn't this Mr. Hades and his family? A.I. Faye looked at the family of 4 in the line. Because the wife and the 2 children were too beautiful, even standing in the long line, they were still very eye-catching. Why did they suddenly come today? It looks like they are going to watch the opera. A.I. Faye was a little surprised, but she quickly closed the door and jumped back into the bed. She put the Jean Ping Mei book back into the bed, tilted her head and thought for a while, then got up from the bed again. Let's go and say hello, after all, they are considered business partners. A.I. Faye muttered, then found her most flirtatious clothes from the wardrobe, sat in front of the dressing table, and began to wash her face and put on makeup. The front row tickets are 600 copper coins each. 2 tickets are 1,200 copper coins. Mara skillfully took the money and casually said, "How many tickets does the next person want?" "What tickets?" "The 4 seats in the middle of the 4th row." A voice replied. Mara's hand that was holding the money paused, and she suddenly looked up at the man standing in front of her. Her face suddenly showed a look of surprise. "Master. Why are you here?" "Of course we are here to watch the opera." Meg smiled and said, "The opera house has been rebuilt, and I haven't come to see it in a long time. Since I have time today, I came to experience it." Yes, the new opera house looks really impressive." Amy looked up at the gray and black opera house and nodded her little head. "Let's sell the tickets first, the people behind are still waiting to enter." Meg smiled and reminded her. There would be plenty of time to chat after the opera was over, so he couldn't affect the viewing experience of the guests behind. "Okay, 4 tickets, take them." Mara quickly took out 4 tickets, tore a corner, and handed it to Meg. "This is the ticket money." Meg took out 2 gold coins and 4 silver coins and handed them over, and then led the children into the opera house. After the renovation, the opera house became a huge 3-story building, or more accurately, 2.5 stories. They entered through a passage, and bright lights were lit on both sides. The height of the hall on the first floor was up to 10 meters, and it was much more impressive than the circus from before. The huge stage was now closed, and the lights were dim. The ascending auditorium and individual rows of seats gave Meg a sense of familiarity. He didn't participate in the design of the opera house, and it should be Vicky who was in charge. With a budget of 5 million to achieve this level of overall presentation really surprised him. The tables and chairs were clearly numbered, and the staff in the auditorium to guide them to the seats according to the number on the ticket, convenient and at the same time, to avoid unnecessary disputes. "Here." Meg found a seat and sat down. He looked to his left and right, and more than half of the audience was already taken. Moreover, the number of people in the front row was obviously higher than the back row. Amy leaned against the soft cloth chair and said with a smile, "This chair has become more comfortable to sit on. If you sleep on it, it should be more fragrant. It's not bad." Meg also leaned back in the soft chair, and at the same time, he looked at some of the details of the opera house. There were 2 large windows at the back of the auditorium. It looked like they were closed with iron plates, and when they were open, they brought good natural light to the opera house. Coupled with the lights on both sides, before the performance began, it could give the guests a comfortable seating experience. Sitting in the fourth row and watching the stage felt very comfortable, but Meg could see that the opera house's design was very professional. Vicky might have also asked for outside help, so the viewing experience in the back row shouldn't be too bad. After looking around, Meg was about to withdraw his gaze, but he saw a familiar figure in the corner. Why is he here again? Meg looked at the man in the cloak, and showed a somewhat playful smile. Although he hid it well, he still recognized that the man was the leader of the Marca opera troupe, Pascal. This guy was just thrown out by Vicky last time, and he didn't expect to sneak back today. Is he here to cause trouble? Or is he here to perform? Pascal glanced around, and pulled the cloak lower on his head, revealing only a pair of eyes, and looked around vigilantly. He actually didn't want to come. If it wasn't for the fact that he was forced to live, who would want to be a dog here? After Mr. Boca's heart was broken by Vicky that day, he didn't eat or drink when he went back, and soon fell ill. For some reason, his family seemed to know the whole story, and put the blame on him, and forced him to spit out all the money he took from Boca. With his status, and with his family's status, he couldn't resist at all. Not only did he lose all the money Vicky used to buy the actors, even the opera house's venue was mortgaged. If they couldn't raise the money in half a month, they would be kicked out. When he was still in the Marca circus, he had enough of the days of wandering around. Now that he finally had his own opera house, how could he bear to give it up like this? But Boca was the only benefactor he had met over the years, and the others weren't even considered fair-weather friends. Who would be willing to lend him hundreds of thousands of copper coins? After thinking for a while, the only person he could think of was Vicky. Back then, he had ignored the Black Cat Song Troupe, but now, the Black Cat Song Troupe was out of his league. This extravagant opera house was miles ahead of the Marca circus, and the ticket price started at 200 copper coins, which made him envious. What made him even more envious was that the Black Cat Song Troupe was able to ensure that every performance was full, even with such a high ticket price. At least, that was the case for now. This meant that the Black Cat Song Troupe could earn more than 300,000 for a single performance. 3 performances a day, that was close to 1,000,000 copper coins. Pascal's throat moved. What kind of wealth was this? He treated Boca like his grandfather, and after such a long time, he only got 1,000,000 copper coins from him. But now, the Black Cat Song Troupe could earn more than 1,000,000 in a day's performance. The purpose of his visit today was very simple. He wanted to confirm whether the audience was fake, and let Vicky buy the Marca circus. Pascal felt that he had lowered himself today. He intended to give Vicky a chance to buy his opera troupe, and as a condition, he could get half of the Black Cat Song Troupe's ownership. Of course, as the buyer, he could reluctantly be the deputy head, and he wouldn't have to compete with Vicky for the position of head. Thinking that he was about to become one of the owners of an opera house that earned 1,000,000 copper coins a day, Pascal couldn't help but laugh like a pig. This laugh attracted the attention of the staff who was guiding the guests to their seats. "Hello audience, can you take off your cloak? Your cloak is too high, and it can easily block the view of the audience behind you, affecting the viewing experience of others." The staff walked up to him and said with a smile. End of chapter. Chapter 23:30. Pascal looked at the smiling staff member, and his expression under the cloak changed instantly. His forehead was already covered with sweat. The surrounding guests who were waiting for the performance to start also looked at him. I have photophobia, and I can't be exposed to light," Pascal said in a low voice, secretly praising himself for being so quick-witted. "I see." The staff member looked a little troubled after hearing that. He pondered for a moment and said, "Please wait for a moment, I'll ask the leader how to deal with this." With that, he turned around and left quickly. Hey, hey, hey. Pascal panicked instantly. Looking at the staff member who left briskly, he almost jumped up. I'm doomed. The staff member was probably newly recruited, and didn't know him. However, if Vicky were to come, she would definitely see through his disguise. The scabs on his face from her scratches had just healed in the past 2 days. He didn't want to provoke that woman again. However, after looking around, he discovered that 80% of the seats in the theater had already been taken. All of them were the most powerful and wealthy people in Rodu, so even if Vicky didn't like him, she most likely wouldn't attack him in a situation like this. Furthermore, he was here today to negotiate with Vicky, so it wouldn't hurt to meet her face to face first. Meg looked at this scene with great interest. He was also a little curious about what this woman was doing at the Black Cat Opera House today. After a while, Vicky, who had changed into a black Lolita dress, walked out from backstage, and walked to Pascal's seat under everyone's astonished gazes. Is this the leader of the Black Cat song troupe? Mommy, is this Miss Black Cat? She's so beautiful. She looks exactly the same as in the picture books. Her dress is so beautiful. Hubby, I want one too. Okay. I'll custom make one for you when we go back. The audience discussed among themselves. They didn't expect to see the lead actress of this opera before the performance started. Although she didn't appear on the stage, her aura was still quite stunning. Vicky frowned as she looked at the audience who was curled up in the corner with a black cloak covering their heads. However, she still said gently, "Dear customer, if you have photophobia, can you change into this slightly shorter cloak? That way, you won't affect the audience behind you." Pascal looked at the cloak in Vicky's hand. He thought for a while, and said in a low voice, "No, I can't be exposed. I can only wear my own cloak, not other people's cloaks." As soon as the man opened his mouth, Vicky's eyebrows were already raised like swords, and her eyes became sharp. She said coldly, "Indeed, you can't see the light of day. It seems that you've forgotten the pain after your wounds healed, and are here to ask for a beating again." As soon as Vicky said this, the surrounding guests revealed curious expressions. It seemed that the head of the Black Cat song troupe and this audience member knew each other. However, the way she spoke was really to Miss Black Cat. Pascal's face under the cloak was covered in cold sweat, but he still said in a shrill voice, "You. Is this how the Black Cat song troupe treats the audience? I bought a ticket to come in. You're bullying me." If it's a proper audience, we'll naturally welcome them warmly. However, if it's those bastards who come here to cause trouble and pester us, we'll naturally welcome them with a stick. Vicky coldly said to the staff at the side, "Throw him out. The Black Cat song troupe doesn't welcome him." As soon as she finished speaking, 2 staff members came forward, one on the left and one on the right, and carried Pascal out. Wait a minute. Pascal's 2 short and fat legs flailed in the air as he shouted, "Head Vicky, I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm really here to watch the performance. Not only do I want to watch the performance, but I also want to discuss a business deal with you." Vicky looked at him coldly with undisguised disgust in her eyes. "I'm not interested in discussing any business with you, and I don't want to say another word to you. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If you miss it, you'll never see it again in your life." Pascal grabbed onto the back of a chair, and his face was flushed red from exertion. He said in a hoarse voice, "I'm willing to merge the Marca Opera Troupe and the Black Cat Song Troupe. You'll be the head, and I'll be the deputy head. We'll be called the Black Horse Opera Troupe in the future, and it'll definitely be a hit. We have the best opera singers in Rodu, and they'll be able to enrich your performances. You won't be able to find them anywhere else. Marca Opera Troupe. Is there a second opera troupe in Chaos City? I thought an opera troupe was something very trendy. Looks like I'm ignorant. I know about that Marca opera troupe. Their performances are too boring, but their hypnotic effects are pretty good. I'll go and watch them when I can't sleep, and I'll fall asleep in no time. In terms of functionality, they're pretty good. The customers were all discussing among themselves, and were very interested in the argument between the two of them. Meg wanted to laugh when he heard that. This Pascal was really daydreaming. He still had the cheek to come to the Black Cat Song Troupe at a time like this, and even shamelessly wanted to be the vice leader. There were no professional opera singers in the Marca opera troupe. They were just a bunch of hooligans. He didn't know where they learned to sing, but they sang like mosquitoes as soon as they went on stage. They could sing people to sleep in no time, and no one knew what they were watching. However, their courage was very commendable. Vicky would probably throw them out right away. Vicky looked at Pascal, who refused to let go of the chair, and was so angry that she couldn't help but laugh. You're saying that you want me to merge with the Marca opera troupe first? And you're going to be the vice leader? Vicky asked Pascal. Yes, yes, yes. I'm making a huge concession. It's enough to see my sincerity. Pascal hurriedly nodded, and said with a smile, think about it. I've been in Rodu for more than 20 years, and I have connections from the nobles to the commoners. Do you think people really accept opera so easily? Actually, it's all thanks to the Marca opera troupe that the Black Cat Song Troupe is where it is today. Now that the Black Horse Song Troupe has just started, if I were to run it, it would definitely reach a higher level. This time, even the seated customers were a little impressed by his shamelessness. They had clearly come because of the Miss Black Cat picture book. What did it have to do with the Marca opera troupe? It seemed that this fatty hiding in the cloak was really here to cause trouble. Throw him out. If he still refuses to let go of the chair, break that finger of his, Vicky said coldly. Then, she turned around and walked backstage without looking back. The two staff members who couldn't do anything to Pascal reached out to grab his hand. End of chapter. Chapter 23:31. What a scary woman. Pascal immediately retracted his fingers from the back of the chair. He resigned himself to his fate and allowed the two staff members to carry him out and throw him onto the street. Someone hit me. The Black Cat Song Troupe hit me. Pascal rolled on the ground and yelled at the top of his lungs. The spectators lining up at the entrance all looked at him with puzzled expressions. This is a thief. He was caught red-handed. Everyone, please be careful, the staff member explained with a serious expression. The people lining up covered their wallets and looked at Pascal with vigilance and disdain. Pascal. Even a staff member in charge of ticketing in the Black Cat Song Troupe acted so naturally. Pascal was labeled as a thief by the staff member. It would be embarrassing if he continued to stay there. He had no choice but to get up from the ground and leave with his tail between his legs. Cool. Is this an Easter egg? Miss Black Cat is so cool. Yeah, if she's acting, her acting is too natural. If it's real, I love her character. I'm already looking forward to this opera performance. I heard that the story of Miss Black Cat was created by the leader of the Black Cat Song Troupe. It seems like she's also someone with a story. Vicky's swift handling of the situation not only did not make the guests feel disgusted, but also earned her a favorable impression and increased everyone's expectations. This girl is smart, Irina said with a smile. Her brain is indeed very fast. I suspect that she has dual cores, Meg said with a smile. Dual cores. Irina looked at him in confusion. That's... Meg thought about how to explain this. Mr. Hades, is your family here to watch the opera too? What a coincidence, you're sitting next door. Just then, a seductive voice sounded from the side. A.I. Faye, who was wearing a long red dress, walked over with her hips swaying. A.I. Faye had an excellent figure and was wearing a long dress that hugged her figure. Her slightly curly hair was draped over her shoulders. As she walked, she was very charming and immediately attracted the attention of many men. Who's this beauty? I think she's the owner of the Titan Tavern across the street. She's so pretty. Let me find out more about her. Many men were already tempted. However, A.I. Faye completely ignored their passionate gazes. She smiled and walked to Meg and sat down in the empty seat next to Meg. I happen to be free today. Meg nodded. A.I. Faye, you haven't seen the opera. How could there be such a coincidence when it came to selling tickets? Mara must have given Eiffel the front row ticket that happened to be right beside them. Irina also looked at her with a spurious smile, as if she had seen through her thoughts. I've seen it. I was bored in the morning, so I came to sit for a while. A.I. Faye combed her hair and greeted Irina and the two children. Sister A.I. Faye, aren't you cold? Thankfully, even though A.I. Faye was wearing a rather light dress, she was still quite reserved in her speech, and avoided some unpleasant situations. Soon, the opera house was filled to the brim. After the two staff members confirmed that all the audience members had taken their seats, they reminded everyone that the performance was about to begin. The two large windows at the back slowly lowered, and the opera house gradually dimmed, with only the oil lamps on the three walls providing illumination. The lights on the stage lit up, and following a loud and clear singing voice, the curtains on the stage were slowly drawn open, and the performance began. Meg was appreciating this opera seriously. The stage scenery had become very intricate, and the costumes were still the ones that he had custom-made for them. Coupled with the superb acting skills and beautiful singing voices of the actors, this opera performance was already very good. The story of Miss Black Cat bravely resisting the shackles of her fate and identity, breaking out of her cage, and obtaining a new life was performed by the actors of the opera. The audience was completely entranced, and there were often some who were secretly wiping away tears. The performance lasted for 2 hours, and no one left early. When the final bell rang, the audience stood up, and the applause was like thunder, lasting for a long time. Meg clapped his hands, and looked at Vicky, who was leading the actors in a curtain call, and a smile appeared on his face. This is a real opera performance. Daddy's Restaurant in the alternate world will continue to be updated on the handwriting bar. Chapter 2332. The audience dispersed, and Meg waited in his seat for a while before he got up and led Irina and the rest backstage. Dear audience, the exit is this way. A staff member came forward with a smile, and was about to show them the way. His eyes were a little guarded. We are. Meg was about to explain. They are my friends. A voice sounded from behind. Vicky walked over with a smile. She looked at Meg and said, Mr. Hades, long time no see. Group leader. The staff member nodded slightly at Vicky, and turned to leave. Meg recalled that the last time they met was only a few days ago, but he still praised with a smile, the theater is great, and the performances are great too. No wonder they are called the strongest opera troupe on the Norland continent. It's really boring to compete with an opera troupe like Macca for the first place. Vicky shrugged slightly, but her smile grew wider. Let's go to my office. All right. Meg nodded, and the group followed Vicky to her office. Vicky brought food for the two little ones, and asked them to go to the side to play while eating. She then greeted Irina formally before sitting down opposite Meg. I didn't expect to achieve a full house so quickly. You chose to get more money to renovate the theater back then. It was a wise choice indeed, Meg said with a smile. Is that so? My intestines are green with regret now. If I had chosen to keep a certain percentage of the sales of the picture books, the profits would have far exceeded the previous buyout price. Vicky smiled, and there was no sign of regret on her face. That's true. Miss Black Cat should become a classic. Let's set a small target of selling 1 million copies first. Meg nodded seriously. Vicky's expression froze. She really felt a little heartache now. Oh, yes. I'm here this time to talk to you about the magic movie copyright of Miss Black Cat, Meg continued. Magic Shadow. Vicky was confused. In the future, I might record Miss Black Cat into a moving image using a photo stone, and then broadcast it to the public for a fee. This is your story, after all, so I intend to get your permission first, Mag explained. Isn't this a movie? Vicky exclaimed. I didn't know that the dungeon called this a movie. Meg was deep in thought. It seemed that there were similarities in the development of technology. What's a movie? Meg asked. Vicky muttered. She was shocked by Meg's far-fetched thinking. After all, this world didn't even have electricity, and the steam engine was still in its development stage. It hadn't been used on a large scale yet, but Meg wanted to make a movie. Most importantly, he had found a way to make a profit. He could charge for watching movies. Weren't they planning to build a movie theater? Movie theaters still existed in the 5th-tier cities of the dungeon, but in the 1st-tier and 2nd-tier cities, they had been replaced by a large number of holographic cabins. Even some holographic glasses could provide a better viewing experience than a normal movie theater. But to build a movie theater on the Norland continent, that was ridiculous. Although we can record and save some content with a shadow recording stone, the clarity is limited. Also, the shooting technique and angle are limited. We can only use a one-shot method to record the entire scene, and there can't be any mistakes in the middle. Vicky suddenly realized that it was very suitable to film a live performance of an opera. As long as the shadow recording stone was fixed at the best position in the audience seats, they could film the entire scene from the beginning to the end of the opera. There was no need for editing, and there was no need to consider the camera position. But this was an opera and not a movie. I found a professional to modify a set of equipment. This is the filming equipment. The shadow recording stone's recording effect has been enhanced, and it can be accurately controlled to record and pause. The storage space has also been increased. This is the playback equipment. You can place the shadow recording stone in the groove, and you can read the recorded content. Then, you can do some simple editing on it. You can cut out the parts you need and put them together. Vicky looked at the series of equipment that Meg took out and listened to him talk non-stop. She was already dumbfounded. Do you have to be so hardcore? Not only did you make a set of filming equipment, you even made a player and editing software. And, this is magic. Magic. She felt that there was something stuck in her throat, and she had to get it out. The equipment now is still relatively simple, but it's enough for simple filming. Meg smiled as he looked at Vicky, who couldn't close her mouth for a long time, and clicked on the player. On the screen of the player was a short story about Ugly Duckling and the Mean-Mouthed Parrot, Charcoal, from the magic potion shop next door. There wasn't much to see in the content, but Meg showed the practical functions and methods such as scene switching, camera following, and image editing. After watching it, Vicky was silent for a long time. Then, she looked at Meg with a serious face, and said, I have two thoughts in my mind now. What? You're a super genius, or, you sneaked out from the dungeon. Vicky stared into Meg's eyes as if she wanted to see through him. Which one do you think I am? Meg smiled as he looked into her eyes. Vicky thought seriously for a while, and said, the former. Why are you so sure? If you came from the dungeon, there would be more and better alternatives. Secondly, if you came from the dungeon, you would only stay away from me, and wouldn't bring these things to me, Vicky said. You're a genius, at least in many aspects. If I were to be polite, wouldn't I seem hypocritical? Yes. Then, with this set of equipment, do you think you can transfer Miss Black Cat from the stage of an opera to a magic film? Meg asked with a smile. Do you intend to film a magic film, or do you intend to translate the opera into a language? I think a dramatic performance would be easier to break out of the circle than an opera, Meg said. Vicky thought seriously for a while, and nodded. If you really intend to film Miss Black Cat, then I have 3 requests. Go ahead. First, I want to choose the actors. Second, I want to be the scriptwriter. Lastly, I want to be the director, Vicky said. Good heavens, she wants to write, direct, and act by herself. Meg nodded without hesitation. Okay. So straightforward. Vicky was stunned. Actually, I don't know much about these aspects. It's obviously better to leave it to the professionals. Meg smiled. And I can guarantee that I'll only provide the money, and won't interfere in the filming process. He was really an excellent investor. Vicky looked at Meg with her eyes sparkling. Then we can start talking about the profit sharing. Or, are you willing to buy out this time? Meg continued. End of chapter. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.